Hey everybody, it's Monday, and this week's awesome person is FraserTSmith. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Thank you so much for doing this. This is
Having
great.
me on.
Shall we get it out of the way and tell everybody what the T stands for?
Thornycroft.
Exactly.
So it's at Midlands. I think like a farming name, to be honest.
Is it?
Yeah, and I think it was one of those. It's not because people would say, that seems very like highbrow, but I think it was mainly there was a Thornycroft, the farmer, and the Smith married the Thornycroft, and the Smith fancied the Thornycroft Smith.
And
So
went double-barreled, and the rest is history.
Double-barreled, it's a good thing. But when you come to do R&B remixes, and as I did, the Thornycroft just took a little shortening.
Yes.
It just feels like it rolls off the tongue a bit easier.
Yeah, and when I first met you, and the fact that your wife was also a T. Smith, I thought, that's weird. They both have middle names that start with T.
Could be.
Yeah.
Chiana. Or
who knows? It could be anything. Could be absolutely anything. Well, thank you so much for being here. I think I'm really, really looking forward to this because you have a career unlike a lot of people. It's you've gone in a lot of really interesting directions, and you've been champion of some really great things. So I just want to get started. So as I told you and everybody who watches these knows, I like to do things chronologically. And one of the things I'd love to get into a little bit is just how you found your way in. So I know, so you grew up in Buckinghamshire, but you moved to West London. How old were you when you moved to London?
I moved to Woolwich when I failed my A-levels through partying too much and being in bands, and I was rewarded with a D and 2 E's at A-level. And the only college that would take me, the two colleges that would take me, one was in Woolwich in southeast London, and the other one was in Hull. And I thought Woolwich sounded way more closer to London, definitely than Hull, but to where I was living at the time. And I realized it was actually quite a long way from the center of London. So the story started in Woolwich.
Right. Well, but you got into music then long before you went there, because obviously playing in bands so much, you failed your A-levels. So what got you into that? Because I from everything I've read, there wasn't a whole lot of like actual musicians in the family, but your nan played piano, which I love you talking about that. Like it was like going to a pub to go to her place, and everyone's standing around the piano and singing. And
in the South London, like a very London, old school London way. And I've tried to remember it back because God rest her soul, she died many years ago. But I would love to be able to beam her back and to see that piano, because at the time, I mean, I even think what I do remember, it was this crazy left hand stuff that was going on. So I think, obviously being a huge studier of music now, I think it was like stride piano.
Right.
It was learned by ear, which is like kind of, that's a lot to just, and I don't know how she would have learned that by ear, because I mean, she was definitely not going onto YouTube and looking at the tutorials for stride piano or, but that very busy. And I just remember being completely blown away by that when I was about 5 or 6, and just the power of music, how people could come together and join around the piano. I mean, it sounds very nostalgic, but that's what people used to do before Google, used to not have the phones and just gather around the piano. And there's something about the community spirit of that which I think hits you very hard when you're very young, because it's just like, wow, what's going on? And this incredible noise is coming out of this wooden box, and everyone's really enjoying it. And so I think that was a very early. I was probably 5 or 6 when I was around there, and then from then I always had this fascination with the piano. Whenever I used to go around to any of my relations in London, they'd usually have a piano, and I just find myself getting lost in the keys and just playing. And then as I was at school, and obviously you become more influenced by the music that's going on the radio, and your friends then got into like ska music when I was young, like bands like the Specials and Madness, and then a whole, going to secondary school I got my first electric guitar, and I could see like the power of jamming. We used to jam in the school music room, me and Tom Rowlands from the Chemical Brothers, actually, and another guy, a great guy called Matt Allwright, who's on the TV now,
right?
As a TV personality that has like a few different shows, and we used to jam out. And Tom from the Chemical Brothers got me into like guitar pedals and Run DMC and
right,
yeah, like probably some of your early records. It's probably a crossover, probably a little bit later in the day that you would have come into the Rick Rubin orbit, but definitely hearing like the Beastie Boys for the first time, all those early Rick records would just, your mind is just blown on a daily basis at that point. I don't know how it is for kids, like being on the internet, because it's just kind of, I guess you're just like the synapses must just be blowing, all the time. Because I just remember, did you have that where I remember being given Jimi Hendrix live at Monterey, and it was literally like probably a month that I was just, that was all I listened to.
Yeah.
And it made this huge impression on me. And then you'd get another record that would be like Joy Division or the Smiths or Hunky Dory, and it would just, there you go again, and it would just, I don't know. Whereas now, I guess you can have these kind of bite-sized journeys into people's music and then come out again. But yeah, it's a lot when you're young.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely part of my childhood. You were saving up for a record, and when things were going well, it was like once a week you could get to the record store and buy one album, and that's all you listened to for the next week. But I mean, I remember I listened to The Wall nonstop for like 2 months. I didn't bother buying another record. Like, well, why do I need to buy a record? I've got this one.
Yeah.
But it is different, and I don't. But then you see their videos all over the internet of people being exposed to classic albums they haven't heard before, and the reactions are there. But I mean, obviously, there's still music being made that impacts people in the same way. I mean, there's some of your records that we're going to get to in a bit, but I think, most notably, probably Stormzy, in a way, because that had a gigantic impact on a lot of people, and it was a record that people would listen to in that same way, like they'd just listen over and over and over. So it still does happen, but yeah, you don't get introduced to it in the same way. It's so easy to, if it doesn't grab you 100%, you move on, as opposed to being forced to kind of live with it. And I don't know, maybe that's good or maybe it's not. But so when you picked up a guitar, you got your first guitar, did you just learn yourself, and did you immediately realize that you had an affinity for this instrument and you got it, or was it difficult? Or it fascinates me because I'm terrible. So
well, you say that, but I'm sure you.
Oh no. No.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I didn't, if I'm honest, you can look back at this, having spent quite a few years as a session player, and I'd still say guitar was my first instrument. I remember getting this classical guitar because my parents said, "Look, we can't buy you an electric because you've got to earn the right to play an electric, and you've got to start on the classical." And I got this book, and the book had like "Skip to My Lou," "My Darling," and the classics, But you're, as a kid, you're thinking, not. Even when this is played as it's meant to be played, I don't know if I really want to be playing this, with all due respect to that great song. But
exactly.
With the guitar is that it's kind of riff based. So if you don't know any riffs, you're kind of dead in the water, because you're sort of playing melodies, but then there's chords which are really hard to learn at the beginning. Any chord, just going from A minor to C to G is hard. So it's not like with the piano where you immediately can just play a bass note, and then you've got all this sort of real estate musically to do stuff and just play a chord and then a bass note and a chord. With the guitar, you've got this physical kind of learning. So it really took me to kind of persevere with it to the point where I was at secondary school, and I could see like guys playing that had been taught by their elder brothers, like Matt Allwright. And I remember him just plugging in one day and playing Space Oddity, the first,
right,
like major 70 minor, like that first, and I was like, wow, I was literally, my jaw hit the floor. And then he went into William, It Was Really Nothing by Smiths.
Smiths, yeah.
It's amazing how you can remember these seminal moments, yet forget your wife's birthday. No,
Yeah.
I always
remember.
No, never. But like, the things that.
Yeah, I think there is this thing. If you don't learn it really young, it's you sort of assume that normal people can't play those songs. Like, that's not something that anyone can just plug a guitar in and do. That's a record or something. And so that must have just been absolutely just head exploding at that moment.
Yeah, and just all the things about, how you could distort an amp, how you could, turn down one volume and just boost the gain, and suddenly it was like, wow, that sounds like that. That's the sound that I've heard on Jimi Hendrix Live at Monterey or that Black Sabbath record I've got, and so these formative moments I think were so important.
Right. And you had really eclectic listening habits even then, it sounds like.
Yeah, my mum, unfortunately her mother died when she was very young, when she was 16, and so she moved to, my grandfather got a job in Queens. This is obviously way before I was born. She moved away, so she had this kind of obviously very tender time where my granddad was working, and she was, I think, 16 or 17 in Queens, and was obviously being exposed to this whole new culture, having grown up in Streatham in South London. But when she eventually came back and she met my father and they married and they had me, but she sort of brought back this I guess record collection from the States, which was a lot of Philly soul and Carole King and James Taylor and a lot of big singers, like Barbra Streisand and Bette Midler, and lots of stuff that she had just been exposed to for the first time in America at that time. So she would play that a lot, and she was really into David Bowie, and then my parents divorced, and my stepdad then was into a lot of classical music and introduced me to jazz and took me to see Dave Brubeck play. And so I think there was and he loved bands like Fleetwood Mac and do you remember there was a band called Sky?
I know of them. I don't think, I may have never even listened to them, but I definitely have heard of them.
Really great band. It was a guitar player called Kevin Peake and the great John Williams, the classical guitar player, not the composer.
Right.
So really like guitar based, but also quite synthy. And that was like my first foray into progressive music. And that was, I guess I was probably 11 or 12. I remember my dad took me to see them at the Albert Hall.
Wow.
So it's interesting how, the seeds are kind of formed early on
and I think even like with Carole King and maybe some of the more songwritery things that aren't as appealing to a young boy who wants more aggression or something in the music, but you're still being exposed to amazing songs, and you can't get away from hearing that, even if it's not your thing at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just when music is on in the house, it has such a positive effect on your taste, as you said, as you get older and you go through life, those records you never forget.
Yeah. All right. So you get to London after, let's not say you did badly on your A-levels because of playing in bands. You did really well in playing at bands at the expense of your A-levels. So, I think, as you say, you're not like in the middle of London, but was this like a real sort of step up in terms of playing at that point, or did you kind of go to school and it took a back seat for a minute?
No, not at all. Because in the back of my mind, while I was would be talking to my parents, they said, what are you going to do? You need something to fall back on. You can't be a guitar player yet. How do you? Which they had a really good point, because I didn't read music. I'd had some lessons from a great local guitar player that came in, and as I was progressing, was turned me on to like Joe Satriani and Steve Vai, so I could kind of play that stuff. But in London at the time, that wasn't you weren't going to make a career from that. I didn't have any contacts in the music industry, so they really had a point. So in my mind, I went to do this business course in Woolwich to get in a band, and just to literally get my grant from the government and use that in order to further my own music. So I was rewarded very nicely after the first year from lack of attendance by being thrown out of college. But I was in a band and we were touring a little bit, and that to me, to be able to sort of soak up the culture of London by playing all these gigs in London, which I'd never played before because we were always playing around here, which to be fair this is a beautiful area because I've moved back to the area where I grew up. So we're about an hour west of London. You know, it's a wonderful rural part of the country, and it's beautiful. You can go for long runs and walks, and it's great for creating. But at the time when you're a kid, it's culturally a little bit barren. So for me to be able to get into the culture where there was like acid house raves starting, but I was into, you know, the bands that I were into were like rock bands. So to experience a bit of the rave culture and rock and being right in the center of town for
and I suppose like Ronnie Size and the whole drum and bass movement was really happening then too, wasn't it?
Yeah. Bristol. So it was an incredible time for me to culturally just to be in the mix of all this stuff going on, you know, and gigging, and you know, we managed to, you know, self-fund gigs to go to France, and so I could sense that the end was nigh of my business course because I literally hadn't turned up, but I saw advertised a course at the West London Institute of Music, which was a scholarship, and kind of behind my parents' back. Not really behind their back because I was, you know, a young adult, but there was the kind of question of, well, I think they were subsidizing me a little bit to be in London, you know, like paying the amount for food, you know, like I don't know, £1,000 a year, which I was very grateful for. So when I got thrown out of the business school, you know, I kind of went back to my dad and I said, look, I've got bad news and I've got good news. And he said, what's the bad news? I said, I've been thrown out of business school. So he's like, oh no, you know, his head is in his hands. Like, what are we going to do with this guy? And I said, well, the good news is that I've got a scholarship to the West London Institute, and that means that you don't have to pay any tuition and anything. So like, I really appreciate all your support, but you know, we're going to be good. So it was I think he kind of respected the fact that I'd seen something and I'd worked really hard to get this scholarship. So then I moved to the other side of London, so to Richmond, and the college was in Twickenham in Middlesex, and spent a really great 18 months there and met some great musicians. There was a band called Reef that formed at that college, and just that it was like two of the best years of my life to be surrounded by musicians, because I'd always wanted to go to Berkeley, college, but I mean, just the overseas fees are just not. You know, not that I was, you know, I didn't at all come from an impoverished background. I was really lucky with my parents in terms of what, you know, the buying me a guitar and stuff. But it was just a point where, you know, we were a comfortable family, but not a family that could be sending.
Well, and also, I mean, for the people in the States who don't know, I mean, university here was free until 20 years ago, something like that, and then it was ridiculously cheap. So the fees for U.S. colleges were completely insane to people coming from this country at that point. Yeah, no, right. It was just, so that wasn't an option. So I managed to sort of write that in my I'm still doing it, where I'm at Berklee College of Music doing the online stuff, which is just phenomenal. So yeah, that was a great thing that managed to sort of come around. But yeah, at the time, just spending, you know, unadulterated hours practicing and being in the company of musicians and recording, and just feeling like you could have this free time, you know, to the free studio time, to record, was just like an absolute dream. And I think that I've still maintained that kind of desire and that hunger for making music and creating, because I realized that, you know, on the other side, if you're not afforded that luxury, you know, it's life is really hard, you know, and especially if you have an ambition for making music and you know, you're not in the position to do it. So yeah, it's something that stayed with me, that I literally wake up every morning and I thank my lucky stars that I'm making music. Yeah. Well, and also I mean, I know you didn't apply yourself at business school, but you certainly applied yourself to get a scholarship to a music college when you've said you didn't even read music up until it sounds like a year before. So you spent that year at business school actually teaching yourself a hell of a lot to be able to get in.
Yeah. And I've always had a strong work ethic, and I think that's the one thing. I mean, I would never, I wouldn't call myself, virtuoso of anything, but I just love the process and I love learning, and I'm like just a student of music, really. I mean, you know how it is with production and playing, that there's so much to the whole world of music. It's when you're being asked to maybe come up with a lyric or a melody or a guitar part, and then the guitar sound, and then a new bit of gear comes out that you want to try, and then you're looking at the desk and thinking, I haven't mixed for a while, and then you're looking at your concepts and your lyrics and your titles and your drumming or your I mean, for me, I'm sort of permanently in a bit of an impostor syndrome place, just because I think when you have to spread yourself quite thinly as well. I want to, because I want to try and be of service to the artists that come in, but that does mean that you're never ever feeling like you're like the man at any one.
Well, look, I only do one thing, and I have imposter syndrome all day, every day. So
well, that's heartening. I mean, not heartening. That I mean,
no, I think
someone in your shoes.
It's been a common theme in all of these interviews. I mean, I think this is number 39, maybe number 40, and I would say more than half of the people have imposter syndrome, and then the other half are like, "What's that?" Like, not a clue. Like, it just doesn't even occur to them that would be a thing. But yeah, a lot of us have it. And I think part of it just comes from the fact that with everything we do, there's no right answer. You only find out months later if anybody else likes it. So you're never in a room saying, yep, did that, even though you sort of might think it sometimes, which I'm sure, I mean, going through your discography, there definitely have to be some times when you thought, holy shit. But it's, we all suffer it, definitely. So, okay, so you take your 2 years learning, playing things. At what point were you already writing when you were playing in these bands before you even went to business college? Like, when did you realize that writing was a thing that you were, I mean, with the imposter syndrome, you never realize you're good at anything, right? But you must have realized that you were writing songs, like that was something you could do.
Yeah, I would do that. I had, a very typical story, I guess, for the producers, songwriters, musicians, mix engineers. You have your 4-track, don't you? You have your Tascam or the Fostex. It was kind of one of the two, and I had the Tascam 4-track and had a little Yamaha keyboard. And actually, when I look back at it, I mean, I really studied guitar, and I loved really studied the great guitar players, so really got into it. But I think that if I'd have known what a producer was when I was younger, I would probably have been a producer much younger, because actually all the signs were that, I was making multi-track recordings, albeit very basic, but very young. And for me, like the making of the demo cassette of my guitar playing was like the best thing to, like, how do I get the drums, and, saving up this little drum machine and recording that into the 4-track, and then recording something else and bouncing the 2 tracks across. And, all that stuff that was actually, the joy of it, which is essentially what I'm doing now, and that's the thing. But at the time, without online, the world of production was kind of a dark art. I remember going to an early guitar session, and there'd be a guy there with a briefcase, and at the end of the session, I said, what's in the briefcase? And he said, they're all my samples. That's a lot. It's got a combination on it. You'll never. Like, fast forward to today, where we all are so lucky to have platforms like Splice and all the other sample companies. We just have access to these sounds immediately. But at the time, it was like, there's guys walking around with like locked briefcases full of S1000 discs,
yeah,
stuff like that. So, and people weren't really, I mean, I'm sure there were books on it, but without the internet, it was like you weren't really aware of what jobs, unless you had an older brother or your parents were in the music industry, which I didn't have either of those things. You're kind of like having to work it out, what went on in the studio.
Yeah. I mean, I had no idea, and then found Mix Magazine, and my head exploded.
Yeah.
But I think it was the mix was going then. Sound on Sound was going then, but there weren't that many either.
No.
And also everybody people were guarding things at that point too, you know.
Yeah. And I think also the point of entry was a huge studio with an SSL desk and I guess as a sort of tape op, you can see your route through working at one of the big studios and coming through that way as a lot of the great people that you've talked to, you know, that's the traditional route to mixing.
Which also meant you didn't need to know anything when you showed up because you were going to be taught everything and there was a process.
Yeah. But as a musician, well, I got through because leaving college, I mean, there was a period where, you know, as a virtuoso guitar player, you know, you're learning those Steve Vai solos, you tend to get good pretty quickly at you know, all that kind of stuff, you know. So I had all my modes down and I could do all these crazy solos, and then realized very quickly that actually meant absolutely nothing when it came to earning money, you know. So I had to suddenly learn how to sing Beatles songs, you know, and take the PA round and play in pubs. And that was in between like collecting glasses in local pub and serving pizzas and washing up, you know, because that was, there was nothing else really I could do. So,
right.
So that felt a little bit crushing from a point of view that, you know, I'm not sort of work shy at all, but I came out of college thinking, you know, this is like, you know, I didn't have the imposter syndrome at the time, and I thought, I've spent 8 hours a day for 2 years practicing guitar. You know, I'm really like ready to do something. But then no one knows who you are, and actually, you know, they're like, well, there's that guy with the Ibanez guitar that plays Steve Vai solos. You know, he's not going to be very good at for the Saturday night barn dance or the blues that we're doing or the whatever. So I guess then what was great was the journey, I think, as any musician, which is you know, you're knocking on doors and you're hustling to try and get a gig, and you're playing terrible gigs. And, you know, when you see Blues Brothers and the wire fences up, you know, some of those gigs are like that. You know, you're driving into areas where you think, you know, I'm not even a great singer. You know, my singing voice is a bit like a very drunk Elvis Costello. I mean, drunk in that I'm assuming that when Elvis Costello is drunk, his tuning like goes out. So I'm, you know, I'm just trying to paint the picture, but it's not one that you'd necessarily pay good money to go and see. You know, maybe the guitar playing you would, but definitely not the singing. But you know, to keep costs down, I would have to be the one taking the PA and doing the singing and guitar playing. So you know, you had to sort of cut the cloth accordingly on those times. But it's those sort of gigs are very strengthening for a musician. You know, because you just gotta play for 3 hours, you know.
Yeah, and it's got to be fun for people to listen to. So
yeah,
I think it's great because, like you say, it's very easy to sit and say like, "Oh, I can do this and I can do that and I can do that," but until you're forced to see how people react to what you do, it doesn't really occur to you that is the whole point of doing any of it. So it's a really good lesson to learn young.
No, absolutely. Because I think, to be fair, like have my head on my backside a little bit coming out of music college. There's lots of people, you know, music college should be about kind of taking things to the nth degree, but then, you know, you have this huge kind of art versus commerce thing of what people want to hear. You're right. And so, the cover gigs needed to come in.
Yeah. So then how did you transition from that into more of the studio guitar player? How'd that happen?
Well, I literally got to the point where I became so despondent with playing in the pubs that I was torn a little bit, because I realized I had to earn money, but the kind of soul of it, the soul of what I wanted to do musically, I think had been ripped out a little bit, because I was working so hard to sort of pay the rent, so to speak, and I was, you know, working crazy shifts in being a waiter and you know, washing up and stuff. And then when I could be getting these gigs, you know, and doing the gigs that should have been really special, just weren't really connecting. And I don't know, like people went into it because I wasn't very good. I mean, I took the responsibility for it, but I reached the point where I said on a Saturday night, and I remember this really clearly, I'm not gonna do this. I need to like really rethink what I'm gonna do, because music's so dear to me. I need to be doing something that just feels good. So I was talking about that to my mum, and she said, well, I've got a contact who is, let me get this right. So it's Rick Wakeman's drummer, who is a great guy called Tony Fernandez. His mother-in-law knew my mother. So my mum said, look, you know, this is a shot in the dark, because who knows, you know. And I didn't know who Rick Wakeman was at the time.
Shame on you. I'm a prog kid. I'm just kidding.
But she said, look, why don't you send one of your demo tapes to I'll give it to Tony's mother-in-law. So I did. And then one day the phone went, and shortly after I'd said I wasn't going to do any of the like really bad gigs anymore. And it was Rick Wakeman's son, Adam, who is one of my best friends. And he was looking for a guitar player. So he'd been given the tape by Tony. It sort of bypassed Rick, but Tony is like an uncle really to Adam. And they'd been on tour together. You know, Adam was playing music with Rick on tour as a, you know, he's a complete virtuoso and like a prodigy, I guess. You know, he released his first solo record when he was 18. You know, it's just he is one of these amazing people that is so talented. And Adam said, look, I'm looking to form a band. I've heard your guitar playing. It's just this kind of thing, you know, hearing all this Steve Vai kind of stuff. It's just sort of thing, you know, you write songs and let's start writing together. So Adam and I started writing. I used to go up to his house in Bedfordshire, and we used to do the demos, and Adam used to sing a bit, and I used to do backing vocals. And then that led into, that band was called Geronimo Road, and we did a few gigs and got a great singer called Damian Wilson on vocals, and got the band up and did some gigs. And then Adam told his dad about me, and yeah, there wasn't even really an audition, but I think Rick had heard some of the stuff I played on his, you know, Rick's like, if he hears someone he likes, he's like, yeah, we'll bring them on tour. You know, it's like a, you know, so baptism of fire. I can't remember what the first gig was, but actually, no, the first gig was crazily a circus that Rick was doing the music for. Like, it was called Cirque Soleil is the
Cirque du Soleil is the big one.
It's the one in Vegas.
Yeah.
Okay, this Cirque Surreal. So I don't know which one came first, but I think at the time where Cirque Soleil was coming up, there was this other one called Cirque Surreal, and the incredible surrealist circus. Rick had done the music for it, which was brilliant, and Adam and I went down and had like the time of our lives, because it was like 6 weeks in Brighton and then 6 weeks in Gloucestershire. So it's full band, Rick's band. Rick wasn't actually playing. He'd done the music and left it in Adam's capable hands, who was the musical director. And we were just playing this music and playing while there were high wire trapeze artists coming.
Wow.
And you know, this whole thing, and being part of that and being part of the whole group. But me and Adam like really bonded at that time, because we were able to write songs, because we were free in the day and we were being paid. I mean, probably looking back at it, it wasn't that much, but at the time, you know, I was on like minimum wage and you know, working whereas I was getting paid. Like, I just remember feeling so rich, you know, and just being able to you know, feel like I had a proper gig. That was my first ever gig, and meeting Tony Fernandez and the rest of the band, and just playing this incredible music, which was, you know, not a million miles away from the kind of proggy stuff that I'd been learning. So I felt like it was really I was very at home playing that music. And the time changes, you know, I'm not a schooled musician, but I could just feel where the changes were coming. I could count it, but it was more of a feel thing to me, that the progressive kind of stuff. So then Rick was really happy with what I'd done on that. And then I think we went on a UK tour playing like the Six Wives and then we went to Russia and did some shows. We played Journey to the Center of the Earth, which is like a serious piece to learn, because none of it repeats. And I mean, that was, but to have the musical apprenticeship, it really was an apprenticeship, under Rick. I think, it's like a jazz musician going back and saying that they work with Miles Davis, and for me, obviously, being a huge Bowie fan, we'd be traveling places, and I just, I'd be wanting to know about Life on Mars and Space Oddity. And then we did another tour. It was just me, Rick, and Adam, and Rick asked me to sing Life on Mars and Space Oddity, which was like completely terrifying.
Wow.
Being next to the guy. But the amazing thing was knowing those songs so well and those arrangements so well, I was able to see that Rick is really like the sound of those records. Obviously, David Bowie and his songs are also the sound of the record, but the orchestration, everything that you think is kind of orchestrated, is actually Rick improvising on a mellotron.
Right.
So through all those lines, they're not. It's Rick. It's Rick with 4 keyboards going around him, and a bit of Moog and a bit of mellotron and something else. A CS80 he's got that he's holding down the pads on. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And I used to go to the Isle of Man and record with an amazing engineer stroke producer called Stuart Sawney, who's one of my closest friends as well, who we used to go over there, and Rick would leave notes for me to record these albums, and I'd get there and Stu would say, God, I don't know how we're going to do it. You're only here for 3 days, but you've got 6 albums to do, because Rick's so prolific. So I'd be like reading the chord sheet, and then Stuart would be looking at the notes and go, okay, right. You need to do is we've got some Pete Townsend at bar 53. Okay, have you got it? Yeah. And I mean, that as an apprenticeship as well, working with Stuart, on these incredible albums, and we would, I mean, we're gluttons for punishment, but we would start really early, like 10 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock, finish at 6, and then jump in a van, take all our gear, and then play in this local blues band all night, which was kind of the kind of release valve, I guess, from this like music to then just go and play like EA and D all night. It's just, I think, what we needed as a release. But great days, and I'm so grateful for those times, because you can't buy that type of apprenticeship.
No, that's incredible. That's really amazing. It's I can't even imagine. I mean, because for me, I was a gigantic Yes fan growing up, so I just would have lost my mind. Where's the sequin cape and all that? But I love that you went into it and just and also coming into it more from the Bowie side than the Yes side in a way, which is like for Rick, that must have been refreshing in a lot of ways, you'd think.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like I sort of marveled at Rick as which not, I don't know if people is it widely known that he was like the hot shot guitar player? I mean, a session player as a keys guy. I mean, when you look at his discography of sessions, I mean, Morning Is Broken, Cat Stevens.
Yeah. No, exactly. Like he and Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones were on everything for
and all the
years or something.
A lot of Black Sabbath stuff, and the Strawbs and T-Rex, and like so many incredible. He was just the guy that would just turn up. And I mean, I've seen him sight read. I mean, there's just another level, of someone that is so competent that can put his own self into it, and say, he would just turn up at any session and just do his thing. But so many amazing records. And when you know Rick's style as intimately as I do, because when you hear it through the monitor every night, you become very familiar with it. You can just hear it a mile off, and it's so distinctive.
Yeah.
So great days, and say it again, but I'm so grateful. I think you look at how the opportunities you've been given, and just know that your life wouldn't have been the same since. And that I'm just talking on a purely musical level, but from a deeper level of my friendship with Adam, which is you know, as deep as a friendship can be. To Stuart Sawney, I would say exactly the same. Tony Fernandez, Rick, as a person I know I could probably call with any musical kind of dilemma, or you know, if I wanted him to play on a record, I'm sure he would come down. You know, those things. You know, you can't. I'm sure it must be the same with you. You know, the relationships you forge across your career is even deeper than music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, but you were after the Henry VIII on Ice, right? You weren't involved in that.
Yeah,
Okay.
wasn't. No.
Good man.
That's there was some heady days, I think, going on with Rick.
There's a great Prague documentary from I think only last year that Rick actually narrated, and he does talk about that particular event, and the footage from it is just amazing, absolutely incredible.
He didn't do anything but halves. I love that about Rick. You know, when you hear about, it's funny because you know he loves comedy, and he, you know, by the time we were working, obviously, you know, he's got this huge history of music that he'd worked on. But obviously, I wasn't working with him at the pinnacle, you know, of Journey to the Center of the Earth. You know, where he was. Adam would tell me stories of the fact that, you know, Rick literally couldn't walk around in Rio, and you know, they had like armed guards. He had like the whole top floor just for him in a hotel, and you know, this kind of stuff. I mean, it's hard because he's such a affable, wonderful guy that I don't know, there's no ego, and you kind of feel it's weird to look back, you know, when you work with an amazing artist, you know, at I don't want to say the latter part of his career, but the you know, a little bit after, you know, and he diversified. He was chairman of a football club. He'd, you know, been hosted Live at Jongleurs, you know, this comedy show, and then written books. He's done so many different things, you know. But interesting looking back to that point, yeah, whether it was Six Wives, Henry on Ice, and all these amazing things that he did. You know, it's great. You know, we need artists like that push the boundaries.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. So then, how did that end then? How did you decide that you needed to be doing something different, or did it end so you went and did something different?
I think Rick was touring a little less, I think, and I'd saved up a little bit of money, and I then was living back in this area because London was always slightly expensive to be living. Like the cost of living in a flat was a lot of money. So I moved back to this area. It was a bit cheaper, and I rented I call it a studio, but it was actually an office in the front of a printing works with like bars on the windows, and there was a lovely guy called Nigel who owned the print works, and I think like took pity on me a little bit, and gave me this room very cheaply, and I was teaching guitar and producing artists that would come in and would be doing like the occasional gig. And I worked with Tony Hadley from Spandau Ballet for like a wonderful 2 years where we went on tour, and it was really nice actually to play stuff that wasn't as intense as the Rick stuff. You know, the Tony Hadley songs, just playing brilliant songs and just playing, you know, Through the Barricades and True and Chant Number One, like all those songs, and we had again like such an amazing camaraderie amongst the band members. So John Keeble, the drummer, and Phil Williams, Phil Taylor, and obviously Tony himself, like just an amazing guy, and just really hit it off as friends, and did like these sort of one-off European tours, shows, which were like loads of fun. But I was getting into the recording thing and was feeling like that was going to be the way, because I was doing sessions as well. Like my name was getting out there a little bit, so I was able to go into studios and actually see what a producer was. And I thought, wow, you know, whatever that is, I want to be that. So my kind of apprenticeship was to be working with local artists and producing them and writing songs with them. And then I met Craig David, which really threw me off because Craig played me his manager, Paul, at the time, played me an early demo cassette, which had to fill me in Walking Away, 7 Days, and Rendezvous, and Rewind on it, 5-track. And it just blew me away. There was a guitar in there that I loved. There were like DJ elements, two-step was coming through, which I had been a fan of from the early days of that kind of garage music. And Craig wanted me to do a show with him on the Chris Evans TFI Fridays. So we did this show. I was kind of a bit reluctant, but also very excited about the potential of what Craig was becoming as an artist. This was like his first TV show, and we did it, and it went down really well, and everyone loved it. And then they booked me to do Jules Holland later at Jules Holland, which was another like amazing experience. And then I just went on this kind of roller coaster ride with Craig, that all the things that I'd cut in my head, I'd kind of hung up the guitar to be a producer, but then all these things kept coming in. Like you could go and play Madison Square Garden with Craig. You could go and do that. You could go and live in New York for 3 months while Craig's doing all the promo, and do some shows with Craig. So what turned out as kind of one gig ended up as, I'd say, like 3 or 4 years of being on the road with Craig. But as I said, doing all these gigs that I'd never even dreamed that I'd ever play, playing acoustic guitar with Craig at Madison Square Garden. It was just one of the most amazing moments. We played Live 8. We were also writing together, so that helped mine. I learned a lot from Craig about vocal production and writing, and just to see how songs that Craig had written with Mark Hill in a very small studio in Southampton could grow into these huge songs all over the world. And I think that was kind of my apprenticeship, weirdly, as a producer, even though I was playing guitar, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah.
Because I was so close to what was going on that I could really see how these songs were affecting people all over the world. And obviously, just as a musician, going to all these different radio stations in the US and all over the world and playing these big gigs. And I really felt that when I put the line in the sand with Craig and I said, look, I've loved playing with you, and I love your company and your music, but I'm really going to have to go and make a start on being a producer myself. I felt that I could really kind of hang the guitar up, knowing that if I died the next day, I'd be able to say, well, at least I played, the Royal Variety performance or Live Aid or any of these things. It was like I felt very fulfilled in that, and it just felt that had then really come to like a natural conclusion. So then the days of producing and writing commenced.
Right. So was there ever any talk of you at that point just getting into the producer role with Craig, or was that just he had something going on? And
yeah, no, we did tracks on his second album. We did a track called Can't Be Messing Around on his first record. Very early days, but yeah, amazing to be part of this juggernaut. I think I was there for like the difficult second album, which I think very difficult for Craig, because he's seeing that he's just sold 1 million records in the US. People are saying he's broken the US, and yes, he's still only at that point. He's still only like 19. I remember because he couldn't drink in the American bars. Obviously the 21 age. So he's in this kind of weird place, which was, I think, very challenging for him creatively, because really what you probably need at that point is to go back and just do what you did again, and just kind of not replicate, but push yourself forward. But all these crazy offers were coming to him. I remember playing at the House of Blues and looking out, and there was like J-Lo, Stevie Wonder, and like Queen Latifah and Missy Elliott like in the audience. It's a lot. So I think that the second album, which I think is still a great album, but kind of was a little bit mixed for him. The UK is a can be a very tough place to be if you're an artist, because the press will kind of build you up, and then I think, you know, they enjoyed a little bit, kind of knocking him down, and I think he probably needed to kind of find himself a little bit, and I think at that time it was a good time for me to forge my own career as well.
Right. It's interesting. I think a lot of artists, especially if they make their first record themselves and then it becomes successful, they sort of feel like it was successful in spite of the way they made it, and so now they can go do what they think they should do. When a lot of it, obviously, first albums are also the songs you've been writing your whole life up till then. Like, there's lots of stuff about a first record, but I think that it takes a real special view to realize that the limitations were part of why it was so special, and the harder work to make anything happen is part of why those things happen. So it's really easy to see how that could go weird on the second record for a lot of artists.
Yeah, it's just I think when you're young as well, you know, I met Craig when he was 17, so I think his record came out when he was 18. It's just so young.
Yeah,
so young, you know, and being heralded as like the future of R&B, and you know, things started to happen very quickly for him in terms of, you know, the position that he was in musically, and I think that, you know, no one can really be ready for that at such a young age.
Yeah. Well, because what is it exactly that you're ready for? Like, that's insane. I don't think you're ready at any age to have Stevie Wonder and Queen Latifah and the rest of them hanging out, staring at you. It's got to be amazing. So, so you made the decision to do it, but like, what did you physically do to say, all right, I'm a producer now? Because I mean, it's an unknowable thing. Like, I mean, it's hard to even define what the hell a producer is. So,
yeah. Well, I had a studio in my flat in Acton in West London, and I had one of the rooms was my studio, and it had a baffle that was like, I made the booth, and I was very lucky to have, because of the writing that I was doing with Craig on his second album, I was very lucky to have signed a publishing deal to a company called Strong Songs, and they were able to put people in the studio with me. So at the time, I was working with a production partner of mine, a lovely guy called Richard Caldwell, and we were doing some stuff. I'd be doing some stuff on my own, and yeah, just learning the production techniques, I guess, and handing in songs, you know, as a songwriter, and if you got the cut, then you would get the production.
Right.
You know.
And did you have any strong feelings about what genre you wanted to do? I mean, was there a vision of like, okay, this is the kind of music I want to make, or were you just really still open at that point?
I was very open because really, for me, there was nothing that was jumping out of the charts that I felt, you know, was really exciting, if I'm honest. You know, I just knew that I had to learn how to craft pop songs because I felt like I wanted to work in the you know, the mainstream arena, but I was just happy to take whatever I could take to improve, basically, you know, and to help the artist. But then I had a seminal moment when I was put together with an amazing artist called Kano, and he was basically finishing off his album, his first album. He's from the grime scene in East London, and I knew his manager, Richard Thomas, who's a great friend of mine, and Richard suggested to Kane that he go in with me because I play guitar and he wanted a guitar track, but also I was producing a little bit. So Kano walked in and you know, I don't think he knew what to make of me, and I was trying to work him out. And I said, well, if you want a guitar track, yeah, why don't I just play it? You know, what kind of thing are you looking for? You know, and he said, I don't know, like, can you play some stuff? So I went around all my guitars and played some like acoustic, and then some like Spanishy stuff, and then some like Nile Rodgers-y funk guitar. And he's like, no, and this like will resonate, because I don't even know if you I'd like to know if you mix this track, but then I played some guitar, and it was like a kind of 99 Problems kind of guitar riff, and he goes, "That's what I want." And I was thinking, "Oh, you should have just said I want to do like 99 Problems, but with crime," you know. So did you mix that track?
I did.
You did.
And it haunts me to this day. There's so many bands that want to sound like 99 Problems.
That's one of the finest mixes I've ever heard. So, you know, congrats.
Cheers. It's one of the finest mixes I've ever done.
Really amazing. I'd love to hear the full story of that.
Well, and I love the track. Was it Typical Me? Is that the Kano track? Yeah, because it's sort of an outlier on the record in a way, but it also fits in perfectly. But it is nothing but a guitar riff and a drum beat, basically.
Yeah. So I this is where, like, music, I've thought about this, and you know, the most amazing thing about music, I think how much older than Kane am I? I'm like 14 years older than Kane. So, you know, he walks into this place. He's from East London, you know, deep East London, you know, and I'm from West London. So he's come across, you know, we're from different cultural backgrounds, and the thing that we love is music, you know, and the thread that is there is music. So as I was playing guitar, you know, I stopped actually, and I said, "Well, what's grime music?" You know, and he said, "Well, it's kind of a bit like this, a bit like garage." I said, "Okay, I know garage music." So we talked about that, and about how some vocals are kind of pitched up and sampled. And I said, "But what's the beat like?" And he said, "Well, it's kind of like hip hop, but it's also like R&B, and it's kind of got elements of like garage, but it's slowed down, and it's like 140 BPM." And I had an Akai MPC drum machine. I said, "Well, I've got some sounds here. Just tap out the beat." And he'd never done that before, but he started tapping out the beat. I jammed, and it was just this wonderful moment of two very unlikely friends to be, like, just bonding. And we literally I played that riff for like 2 hours, and he was just tapping out the beat, like not having sequenced it, but literally like live on the pads.
Right.
And it was just, I don't know, it sounds kind of basic, but it was just an amazing, wonderful moment.
And it's a weird beat too.
Yeah,
but
it's a really good beat.
It's why it works with the only reason the track works is because those two things really shouldn't go together at all, and they do. And it's a really incredible track. I mean, I hadn't heard it for a while, and as soon as I started listening, like, oh right, it's that one, because it catches your ear. It's a really kind of special marriage of things.
What did you say? I'm feeling a bit self-conscious, you know, talking to the man that mixed 99 Problems. You know,
whatever.
Those guitars that were in the other room. I recorded those guitars I had to put like sofas around the and padding around the amps, because I was in a flat. You know, the neighbors were always complaining about the noise levels. But yeah, great moments. And so that for me, I realized then that, you know, I had this strand within me that was always going to want to write as good a song as I could ever, you know, classic kind of songs. But also I was so excited by the rap scene in the UK, because to me, you know, that song was played on radio, and I could hear my guitar and the beat and Kane's lyrics, and they fascinated me, and his flow was kind of weird. And I just felt, for me, rap music in the UK, and it still is like the most exciting music. Honestly, it's like, you know, electronic music is pushing boundaries, and it has its ebbs and flows of people coming through. I think we're actually about to enter this phase of electronic music that's going to be incredible. Well, it already is, but is going to go to a new place. But I've been very lucky to be blessed to work with some amazing rappers, where literally it's like, do you want to play keys? Are we doing a piano track? Are we doing a big guitar track? What are we doing? You know, and are we putting these weird beats together? It's so exciting and so fresh.
Yeah, and you can do anything. Absolutely anything.
That's the thing. So for me, as being someone kind of eclectic, I can just bring all the influences to the table.
Yeah, and look, I was going to ask you this once we got a little bit further on and to Stormzy and things, but I'll just ask now. So, when you're talking to Kane about what is grime, and then you start talking, you're sort of defining these genres, and the genres are very, very specific and well defined, and I think that the sort of founders of the genres are almost militant in their defense of the genre in a way, like, oh, that's not what we do, sort of thing. But you're constantly bringing other elements in. And is that sort of a conscious decision, or is it just you're always doing what you hear? And has there ever been any kind of pushback from the artist saying, yeah, I love that, but we can't do that? Because it feels as though you managed to bring these really specific genres out into the open where no one would even know, like, oh, no, that's grime, that's garage. Like, it's not about that anymore by the time you're done with it. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
I think recently I've been going in to think about that, from the point of view of doing interviews on my record and just making sure that everything that I've done hasn't been appropriated. And I think that as people, the past year, I think has rightly shone a spotlight on. I know this wasn't like really. I will get back to that.
No. Look, you talk about anything you want.
Anybody within music that has to look at their contribution and the what they've brought to the table, and I think that. I think you have, you said it. You have to be very respectful of genres and of culture, and I think that for me, it's I've been the guy there that can bring something new to the table if that's what is called for. But I think I've always been sensitive to knowing that. Well, certainly. I'm always sensitive to knowing whose record it is. So at the end of the day, I'm wearing the producer hat. I don't think I'm necessarily the guy that people will come to because of that particular snare or because of that. I mean, you know how it goes. Something is successful, so people come and expect that one thing, and then you're wanting to do something else, and then it usually doesn't go so well because you're trying to push in a different direction because you're wanting to always progress and never sort of tread on the same ground twice. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm just an open book. I'm a lover of music, and I think that my thing is always to be of. I think I said it before. I mean, I want to be of service to the artist. I know that sounds a little bit like. I don't want to sound like a philanthropist because I get so much out of this, but I look at what I can bring in a really respectful way without treading on anyone's toes. So, I was really keen that for Typical Me, we got the right grime beat, and that's why Kano played it, and he knew those sounds. And then I researched more, and I was able to say, well, how what about this kick? Would that work better? And I don't know if it did or it didn't, but I think that. I never want to inflict anything or be too heavy-handed. I think it's about making light suggestions, and the Kane. I think for Typical Me, for example, it was a unique kind of clash of styles and backgrounds, and it really worked. And it wouldn't always. Sometimes doesn't work in such a kind of beautiful way, but I think if you're there and you're able. I mean, going back to the imposter syndrome of never, being a jack of all trades, it can also be great because you can, to the point of recording. I mean, at least you could replace it and get a session musician. Then you can kind of demonstrate how about this kind of jazz thing, or how about this beat, or what do you think of the whirly? Do you like that? Do you like this whirly? So, that sounds like that. Okay, well, cool. I think of it more of as this kind of thing. But then, yeah, I mean, music's just so open like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that to me is the beauty of it. And I didn't mean to get on a kind of soul searching journey.
It's great. It's the point. Well, because I wondered, and I wanted to talk to you about this. So let's just talk about it right now, because I think it's important because. So when you meet Kane, he's a grime artist, and it's a pretty specific thing. You're not of the grime world at that point, but you make such successful records with the artists who are the champions of these genres. Do you feel like, in a way, you're sort of defining what grime is to the rest of the world, not to the people who were into it from the very beginning and created it out of whatever it came from, but as far as everybody else on the planet, me included, grime is what they hear on the records that you make, because those are the ones that go out to everybody. And it's a really, I don't know if I'm explaining this right or not, but it's interesting to me where within the subculture that makes the thing, it's one thing, but then from the outside, like the records you make are the thing, if that makes any sense. I'm talking myself in circles.
Yeah, I would just challenge that.
Please do.
By saying that, there are a lot of obviously incredible people that have, started the scene, and that I wouldn't want it to feel like I'm the lucky one that people come to. I mean, I have a thing that I do, which I guess is ostensibly, use my background of everything I've learned from recording traditional instruments, which is what, like, there's millions of people on the planet that do that like way better than me. But with my, I guess, love of hip hop and garage and grime and all these different genres, I understand the genre enough to be able to, again, like, be of service, so that I can put a piano on which doesn't sound, I mean, I'm not even saying I'm in any way like reinventing the wheel, but I think that I did, and not even knowingly, but I kind of, I made this little sort of thing for myself where artists could come, they could feel very safe in terms of creating. They weren't necessarily going to lose the hardness of the beats, because that was something I'd always maintain and I understood, from the records that you mixed, because they were a lot of the records that I was hugely influenced by. We'd obviously be pulling up like so many of your records in the studio and just chasing that big American sound, in terms of the way the drums were mixed alongside guitars and stuff. And that's still something that, you're an absolute the master at, but I guess the quirkiness of these genres I could get as well. So I mean, it's nothing that was necessarily put, but I guess I'm just wanting to be careful on this incredible platform that you've given me, Andrew, is to not run away with any credit where I'm taking the credit from you, and honestly, from you, it means like the absolute world, because you know what a fan of you I am. But I'm also not, and there's no false modesty here, but there's so many great people that are doing, making, or have made these incredible grime records and these incredible like UK rap records. Just been very lucky to have been, well, for me it's Kano, Stormzy and Dave that I've been blessed to given the opportunity of helping them with their journey through them, I guess, wanting to feel like they could take this, I don't even want to say elevate, but take the genre to a different place.
Right.
With the musicality.
And it's also, I mean, it's realizing their vision too. You're not forcing them to do this. Like, Kane came in wanting that guitar, and you are someone who can give that to him. And you could also have given him a, so what jazz trio thing. Yeah. Like, you could do all of this stuff. So, I mean, I think I'd sort of asked the question backwards, but they're coming in looking for that, because, I mean, and again, I keep talking about Stormzy because obviously that record was just so gigantic. I mean, Gang Signs and Prayer, but from everything I've heard you say, he came in with that record in his head, and you were the one who was able to get it out of his head. But it's not like you forced him to have the Harlem Choir on there. Like, that's what was always supposed to happen, and I think that's great. But there was one example, which I think, even going back chronologically, with Tinchy Stryder. So the song "Take Me Back," that was actually more of a conscious effort to not make it palatable. That's the wrong thing, because that the connotation is completely wrong. But to make it more universally available to people. Do I have that right?
No, completely. That was like a game, really, to me, in that I made a record with Kane and Craig called "This Is the Girl," and I just thought this was such a great mix of Kane's verses, Craig's melodies, a beat that was still at 140. So, to push it still was a grime beat, but had a lot more melody, and it just didn't do that well, and I think that it upset me, because for Kane, who is would never consider himself a pop artist, he felt like he was really putting himself, in a not an uncomfortable position, because he loved the track, but he was pushing himself forward. And I think when things like that don't do well, and I was looking at it, I was thinking there was something about the landscape of British radio at the time, where every time you turn on the radio, it's like 50 Cent and American rappers. Don't get me wrong. That's in some ways as it should be, because the American rap music was coming through from, The Game and Eminem and Jay-Z and early Kanye, it deserved to be on the radio. But I was thinking, but how, what about the great rappers in this country? And I really felt that we had to do, if as Tinchy did, wanted to be a star, you had to push it in a way that, with Kane, we could write records that were 5 minutes long, because that's Kane, and that's what he does. If he doesn't go on the radio, he doesn't mind. He's I would say a real pure artist, whereas Tinchy is a great artist, but he wanted to be on the radio. I said, well,
right.
I think I have well, I didn't have the solution, but I knew that 32 bar raps were not the solution. And I knew that melody is usually the solution if you're trying to get onto radio. And I could feel that there was this through electronic music. I could feel that through records that were coming through, that there was this kind of, well, there was the Kid Cudi remix, the Kooks remix, that was the Day and Night remix. And I could hear that, Kid Cudi being a rapper, but being on this beat, we weren't going to get onto daytime radio by serving up a grime track. And I was like, well, if we could keep like a fall to the floor beat, and there was this, really interesting stuff going on with like Fedde Le Grand from the like dance scene, and early David Guetta stuff, where people were like playing with sonics, and synth were really back in fashion at like 2009. And I thought, well, it would be really cool to do some stuff that was around at about 108 BPM, so not even like dance, but just had this pulse. And then started working with Tyler Cruz, who's one of the hookiest songwriters I've ever had the privilege to work with. And he was able to put these kind of very urgent, percussive, hooky melodies on top of these beats. And then Tinchy, it was basically, there was a formula to it, big instrumental chorus intro, 8-bar rap, 8-bar pre-chorus that was building, that was kind of rappy but singy, and then a huge chorus hook, and then a post hook that was like a simple a kind of
right
post, same again, middle 8 out, and I think to really succeed at radio, you have to, I'd like to know, but I'm pretty sure that Max Martin, I guess he's at the point where he's making the rules now, though. When you get so good, you dictate what radio plays, I guess. If you've got blinding lights, then you're like, well, I think you need to.
Yeah, I mean, it's the benefit of the doubt. Like they trust, well, it's Max, I guess it will work. But it is, radio is still like that. Yeah, where they're very specific things they want or don't want. So, but it's
sort of saying that what we did, we made those records in that kind of way that, yeah, for me, the sort of art of it came when on a track called Number One that we did, I bounced the bass and kick drums to tape. I hired in a MTR 90 for the day, and that for me is someone that hadn't come from that world, and to hear, and especially then on radio, and that was like number one for 3 weeks, and to hear that glue and to think, wow, I don't think many people are doing this and in the charts, or in English radio at the time. I know it doesn't sound like, for all the amazing people that you've...
No, it's a big deal. I mean, like that was the Timbaland sound, was smashing tape, and you can't get that any other way. So, but it becomes, when you hear it, it's like, oh, right, it's that thing. And you have an emotional response to it because of all of like the early Timbaland tracks where that became really important. So it's a big deal. It's absolutely a big deal.
Yeah. So I was just experimenting and mixing all those records, and yeah, I was kind of a fledgling mixer, but I don't know, I just had this sound that I felt was sort of working. I mean, at the beginning I was mixing the stuff because there wasn't the budget to really pay an external mixer like yourself. And then I guess when something goes to radio, and then it was a bit like this ain't broke, so don't fix it.
No, exactly. I remember hearing an interview with you years ago. I don't remember what it was about, but you were also talking about the fact that because you're keeping it with you, you can decide 80% of the way through the mix that you need to take it up a half step, or you need to bring the tempo up, or you need to adjust things. And the fact that it's all still floating because it's in your room and you haven't had to commit it and send it off to somebody, and it just made your entire life easier. Now, to just be a geek for a second, did you have like a mixing stage at that point? We'd go, great, done producing, now let's mix, or was it just an organic, now the track is done thing?
No, I think I had to spend a bit of time and just get my head round. I don't think I was at that. I think, well, I don't know. I mean, at different days you could ask me to get a different answer. I mean, I think maybe now I'm more okay with being kind of free with it. And we were talking about this earlier, but I do have to say the thing that I didn't say to you that you had said to me that always echo. I remember whatever it was, 2012 when 21 came out, and we first met, and you kindly invited me to the studio, and we went out for a curry and had a great time. But I remember just asking you, because I thought, I might not see this guy again. I'm just going to have to ask Andrew this question. What do you, at the point before you print a mix, what are you saying to yourself? What are you looking for in the mix? And I think you just turned around and just went, it's got to sound good. At the time I was like, that's not the answer. I want some specific, like, do you have an SPL meter or something like that? And then the wisdom, like the wisdom of that, really, that was like a master mixer comment.
I probably put it in a much more like Impostor Syndrome way. Like I can't hate it. Like it can't sound bad or whatever. Yeah. But yeah.
But that really stayed with me. And I was like, if you turn up a mix and you feel like you want to dance around the room, or you feel like you want to sing along, or you start crying, whatever the emotional response is, kind of that's the mix, right? And I just didn't get that at the time. I was on this quest for knowledge, because not having been brought up in this through a studio or whatever, all my knowledge was through Dave Pensado in what was the magazine that he used to do a column for, or does do a column for?
Oh, yeah, I can't remember now. It wasn't Mix, but it was
Mix magazine. Yeah, it was one of the
one of those magazines.
And he used to do a column. He was so generous with his and right about that time, you know, when I was mixing the Tinchy stuff and the Taio Cruz, you know, I'd literally, like, he'd say, oh, you know, I used a Roland D3000 on Christian Aguilera's voice. So I'd go on eBay and I'd buy it and I'd try it on Tinchy's voice and just like, wow, that does sound really good. Yeah. And like 83000s and all this stuff that he would suggest, I would either hire in from a local hire company and just to see, or buy it and take a risk. And yeah, I mean, I just, amassed some bits just because usually what he said was true, and I just understood of, you know, how powerful the H3000 was just from him mentioning it, you know. Right. So what a great guy, and what a generous
so
spirit.
It's all Dave's fault, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I credit him a lot, you know. When I finally met him on Pensado's Place, when he invited me on, you know, I was kind of awestruck because, you know, you meet someone that's had such a big effect, you know, as I was when I first met you. You know, your records just have been in the, you know, a lot of the soundtrack of a lot of my life. So I remember when I first met you, you know, at the Dan Wilson's house, for that little party that Dan threw. Yeah, it was amazing. So yeah, I consciously went through the process. I had a Chandler summing mixer at the time, and would break out the kick and the snare and the vocal. So they were all mono, and then I think it wasn't like a huge mixer. It's like 8 or 16 channel or something, and then fitted the other bits around it. And I had a pretty like basic studio in a industrial estate, and there was a great guy called Dick Beetham who had a company called 360 Mastering. So I was able to run downstairs and go see the mastering guy and look at everything on his phase scope. And sometimes he'd say, yeah, the kick drum was a little bit stronger on that. This one's a bit like, the other one was like very strong in the mono, and just stuff like that. I just, you know, I'm a sponge for learning.
Right.
And then, yeah, I was working with Taio Cruz and on the Tinchy stuff, and then we started doing some stuff together, and we wrote a song called Break Your Heart, and that did amazingly well and went to #1 in America. That was like the fastest rising track ever, I think, in history on the Billboard chart. So to feel that I'd produced and mixed and co-written a track on that went to #1 was just like, it's just an amazing feeling. For you, it's probably normal because you've had so many, but for someone from the UK, you know, I was just looking at the studio and just thinking, like, looking around at the studio and thinking, this is translated. You know, people will be listening to this song in like Kansas or Oklahoma or Detroit or Boston. You know, it just blew my mind, you know, the power of music. And yeah, I mean, it sort of dispelled, it gave me a lot of confidence, because I kind of felt that you could probably have a #1 in the UK doing my kind of quirky mixy thing, and, you know, bouncing things to tape, not really knowing how hard to hit stuff and all that stuff. But when it got to #1 in America, I thought, wow, this is like, the kind of doors are open to this.
Yeah. Well, and then, because you then had, I mean, you know, you can't really tell just by looking at credits, but it seems as though that kind of opened the door for you to now be someone that you could go write with anybody. You could go produce with anybody, because you had the Kesha track, Kylie Minogue, and then obviously that led to Adele, I'm assuming. But I mean, that seemed to be sort of a different vein. So instead of being entrenched with a UK artist and working on a record and doing that, now all of a sudden you're doing individual bits with people. Do I have it right that changed then, or were you always doing that?
Well, I was always doing it. I was writing. I mean, being in publishing deals, you know, that I'd get great opportunities to work with different people, and my management at the time, when I was doing the you know, the Tinchy Strider thing. Then don't forget as well that I'm sure you've had it, where when tracks are hits, you know, the everyone's like, oh, you know, you're doing the Tinchy stuff. You know, that was #1 for 3 weeks. And then you're doing Taio Cruz, it's #1 in America. But I mean, I remember being called into the office, you know, and the Tinchy stuff wasn't quite out, but I was working with Kano and we're working on all these records that I thought were really, really good. And literally the head of the publishing company just said, look, you know, you appreciate you doing this UK rap stuff, but A, it's not going to travel. You know, it's not going to travel outside of the UK. You know, I don't really feel like this stuff is gonna really work anywhere in Europe. You know, I think we're gonna have to let you go. And that's kind of okay. Well, I could take some of these songs and the new songs I'm going to write obviously will be in part of a new deal. But I had this song that was from the deal that was going to come out, which was I actually saw her picture with Greg, Greg's wife Nina, the amazing songwriter. And we were writing lots of songs together, and we'd like written because we were signed to the same management company. And we always used to get on really well and have fun and write these songs, but they never really went anywhere. It was one of those kind of like, we knew there was going to be one song that would really kind of do something. We kept getting put together and writing with different artists. And then we wrote a song with James Morrison called Broken Strings. And the timing of that couldn't have been better for me because obviously I loved and just loved being part of that song with Nelly Furtado on it, and you know, it's just it was like the song that Nina and I sort of looked at each other and went, okay, we've written like 100 maybe okay songs. Now we got to write the good one, but we wrote it with James Morrison and Nelly Furtado, so it's like all your hard work then just pays off in one song. But the great thing with that was that came out at about the same time. So I think I remember something like Take Me Back, Tinchy Strider was number 2 in the charts, and then Broken Strings was like number 3. So I think all the A&R guys were reading the credits and were like, wow. So he like co-wrote Broken Strings, but he's also producing Take Me Back. And I think people could see me at that point very much as someone that could write a more traditional song or co-write a traditional song like things, but also be on this kind of wave of British rap.
And what bastard was at number 1 that week?
You know, I can't remember. I mean, it was at that point. I mean, I'm pretty competitive with myself, as I'm sure you are. But I do remember that was at the point where we knew we had to raise our game from having the Take Me Back at number 2. So that's when we wrote number 1, which I guess was like, you're really going for number 1, because if you write a song called Number 1 and it goes at number 3 or 4, it's, you know, like you can never, you know, raise your head in public again. So I was really lucky. You know, I was lucky that track went to number 1. Yeah, but and I remember at the point it was LaRue. I think it was Bulletproof that had been number 1 and then dropped to number 2, because at those times you had to wait to hear the charts, and you didn't know until the presenter said, you know, you're hanging around, you're just hoping that it's someone else's number 2 and not you. So yeah, good times.
God,
good times.
Amazing. It's brilliant. So just to keep plowing ahead, and obviously if I'm skipping over anything you want to talk about, just start talking about it. But so let's get to Adele, because why not, right? So off you go.
Okay, so I had, just to keep the chronology going, I had this wonderful period where the sort of, you know, UK number 1s, and I guess would break your heart as well, had traveled out to the US A&R guys. So I had this wonderful time of working with Britney and Celine Dion and CeeLo, and you know, these incredible American artists and well, French Canadian as well with Celine. Just had this ball, and then was working on an album with a wonderful artist called Claire Mcguire, and her music was driving piano and kind of big on the toms, and I put everything into that record, and it was one of those records that just got away, just didn't work for whatever reason. Time and a place. Claire is an amazing artist. I think the songs are some of the best songs I've ever written. I was pretty gutted because I'd spent a year of my life. I'd never spent so long on a full record that just hadn't worked. And because I'd always been writing songs, if you write a single and it doesn't perform, you can kind of get over it. But if you've given your whole life for 12 months, and invested so much emotionally, that was really upsetting. But the universe always seems to have a way of kind of preparing you. I'd actually been playing piano on all of this stuff, and my piano playing had got okay and got the piano sound. And I was working with a great, amazing drummer called Ash Sohn, who I think you might have met, and is a wonderful guy and friend and a brilliant drummer. And so we got a few things worked out in the studio, like how we record live drums really well. And we'd done a lot of work with Rosie Danvers, the amazing string arranger. So I'd done, basically just gone on this voyage of discovery. And I kind of felt like, this has ended in nothing. And then Jonathan Dickens, Adele's manager, said, I'd love you to meet Adele. And, at that time, I think it's always interesting to look back because, the first album had been big.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like Adele walking into the studio now where you're like, wow.
No.
It's she was a big artist, but she wasn't trying to think of someone comparative at the minute. It's hard to say. Like Celeste in this, bigger than Celeste, a lot bigger than Celeste. But Celeste is just coming through. I'm trying to think of a good example, and it's hard now because artists seem to just sort of bubble and then just explode.
Right.
But, yeah.
Well, no, but she'd had enough success that people knew what was going on, but I don't think anyone expected, like, okay, and now here comes the gigantic record. It was like, okay, well, we'll see what happens.
She's a great artist. Everyone loves her voice. It's just so she came in and she said that she wanted to do something that was a bit more kind of up and a bit more rhythmic than the stuff that she'd done before. And I just had this idea of, having worked on the Claire Mcguire album, I was on this sort of tribally Tom, like early U2 kind of Under a Blood Red Sky type of thing. And my piano playing was very influenced by the stuff that I'd done on this record. So was arpeggios and stuff that I think Adele liked. So sort of unbeknown to me, that it felt like the whole Claire Mcguire album was like this amazing preparation for the day that Adele walks in and she, she's like, what have you got? And I had this piano riff, which is the Set Fire to the Rain D minor piano riff, and I felt like really confident to play it to her because I'd spent a year writing songs on piano, which I'd never done before.
Right.
And I had the idea of the toms, which I programmed up on my MPC, and we looped it, and she liked it immediately. Was able to write, the basis of the melodies around it, and then went into the sort of agonizing point of then going into the lyrics, which are obviously like a whole new thing. But the interesting thing was that from our very first meeting, Adele said to me, look, just so you know, Rick Rubin is producing my record. So like, give me a demo, but that's the thing. And obviously that, like, to think that Rick was producing it was almost maybe better than producing it for Adele. Cause I was like, Rick Rubin is actually going to hear my demo. And you think I'm going to send him like a demo? I'm going to send him like the best production I could ever, just so that even if he doesn't know my name, like he would have heard something that I've been a part of. That was such a rush for me. So we wrote the song over like 3 days, and I think like with all great songs, like with a lot of songs that I've been involved in, you reach this point where the same with Broken Strings. It would be interesting to talk to Nina about that again. But there was definitely points where it was like, there were points I think where James Morrison wasn't 100% buying into the song. I think there were points where definitely from my like demo production, the demo production wasn't right. There was definitely points where I think we had to like get the middle eight or something wasn't working. And I think with Set Fire to the Rain, it was an interesting one because you've got like gold. I mean, you know, I don't want that to sound like, you know, I'm not blowing smoke up my backside whatsoever. I mean, this is, if anything, absolutely blowing it, you know, in the direction of Adele. But, you know, when you come to that D minor chord and Adele sings that first line, you know, whether she's singing Set Fire to the Rain or like Scrambled Eggs, I mean, it's just not, you just think people need to hear this, because I'm just, you know, got hairs on the back of my neck just even thinking about it now. But if you don't have the right lyric, or you don't have the middle eight that feels right, you know, it's one of those kind of great escape songs where you know, it will forever live on your hard drive. But we finally got it together and finished it. And I remember, you know, that moment of Adele singing that vocal, and just, I think for me, that will maybe never be topped as an emotional, the level of emotion in that vocal, which is essentially the vocal that you're hearing on the record. You know, I mean, we were set up to me and my engineer at the time, Beatrice Artola, you know, we were ready to like, you know, we recorded enough vocals for it to be like, no, like this could be the one. And
right.
I just remember looking at Beatrice, and then when Adele came back out, you know, it was a real moment. And I feel like, you know, it's funny, isn't it? Or I wonder if it's the same, you know, when you know, you may have mixed 20 records and just not felt happy, and then you mix, you know, 99 Problems in half an hour and something, and it becomes like this juggernaut. And it's kind of like the universe's kind of divine sort of payback in a nice way. Not that you do it for payback, but then you realize why, in some ways, you're kind of unknowingly being prepared,
right,
for what's about to come. And at the time, you're like, you know, why didn't this work? And then, you know, you trust the unfolding, and something miraculous happens, and then you just, you know, you're in this situation where, you know, you spent all those hours getting the piano sound right, so therefore, when we didn't have to re-record it, you know, it was all done, and then we send it off to you guys, and were you there actually?
No, I didn't. Greg Fiddleman tracked all of that, so I mixed the songs that were still left at the end. But already, well, you should tell the story, because it went off. I mean, and they cut a version of it.
Yeah, no, I know. And then, I mean, the thing that I always want to say, because I just want to make sure that nothing gets twisted from my side, certainly. And I know, like, Paul Epworth and Egg White in it. So the situation was that, you know, we were obviously we'd sent our demos off to the safest hands and ears in the world, maybe ever, you know, and the team, you know, you yourself included, you know, it was like, well, we'll see you at the end, and cannot wait to hear what Rick does. And I've thought about this a lot, you know, and I think that the testament to Rick as a person and a creative is that he could never have replicated the demo as most people maybe would have done. Would have just gone, well, that sounds kind of cool. I'll get, you know, the best drummer in LA to come. I'll get Flea to play bass, or, you know, whoever's in town, and just make this kind of, you know, my demo the best thing. But Rick being Rick, I mean, you know this obviously, you know, more than most, wants to give every track something else, and to experiment and be creative. And I think that the version that I heard sounded great, but it just wasn't, I think, what was aligning with Adele in terms of what the song should be. I think she, you know, that demoitis is a strong disease.
Well, there's demoitis, and then there's, is it actually better? I mean, I don't know that. I mean, you know, who knows? But I think that there's something about the version of the song you did that couldn't be like if you tried to copy it, then maybe you would have gotten something that like, oh yeah, okay, this is a better version of what we did. But it didn't want to be changed, did it? I mean, that's the way that song went.
Yeah, and I think that the the way that Adele's vocal is with the beat and the piano, it sort of went from the song to the production, and yeah, I think it was the right call. I mean, as much as that does sound weird, but it's not about anybody versus Rick. It's like it's different versions. This
Yeah,
is music.
and just to fill in the blanks in case we may, because we both know the story really well, maybe we're skipping over it. Basically, Rick cut all of the songs that had been demoed by you, by Paul Epworth, by Dan Wilson, I mean, all things. And then there were quite a few that went back to the original versions because it was just decided. And I think, Adele drove those decisions. She would listen to both versions and just think there's something about the original version that's what I want. So it's, I mean, I think I mixed 7 songs, and I think only 4 of them are on the record. So, quite a bit of that record went back to the original versions of the songs. And it's just a testament to the production that you had done at the time and that Paul had done at the time, obviously. But it's also, I think, maybe in a way, it's also a testament to Adele being in the moment, the fresh reading of the lyrics, the emotional state that you'll never get back to the feeling you had while you were writing the song. You can go back and sing it and you know what it's about, but it's got to be a very special time emotionally.
Absolutely. I mean, I always think about that, bearing in mind that, the mic is always on to record a vocal when I'm writing a song, because it's that moment where it's hard to replicate, but when you're writing that, you're putting yourself back in time. You're literally living the narrative that you're writing about. So it's got to be hard, I think, for a singer to then be somewhere different, be in Malibu and be putting yourself in that same, when you've literally been going round the thought process for like 3 days, to then come and sing. And yeah, with Adele being such an emotive singer, there's something which is just,
well, I think it's also a testament to her ability, because it's, for a lot of people, whenever they sing, they're singing lyrics and a melody, and there'll be something in the performance that's compelling or whatever. But with really great singers, they're singing the song. They sing the entire song in every word that they sing, as opposed to, here's the melody I wrote, here are the words I wrote, and they go in this order. It is a transcendent thing with certain performers. And so it's not just, I mean, you didn't go back to your version just because of the vocal. It's the production. It was the feel of the track. It was everything about it. So, yeah. But it's a testament to everything, to your musicality and the writing process and her as a performer, all of it.
Yeah, and I think it's also a testament to Adele as a purist, because I think 99% of artists would have sort of buckled under the pressure of being with one of, or if not the greatest producer who's ever lived, to be following her heart rather than, a particular version. And that she felt, I know when I went to see her in her flat, and I could tell she was like, I don't want to let Rick down. I don't want to let, I don't want to let the record company down. But a true artist has to follow their heart, and that's what she did. And I think that to know those songs, and then obviously subsequently to see the success of the album and how ultimately it wouldn't have been the same without Rick's input. And I think anyone that spends time with Rick is always a different person post Rick, because there's so much wisdom and guidance that comes through that I think that's what makes that record great. It's those kind of decisions and just, it's testament, isn't it? Because I don't, there's, the piano on that, bearing in mind the sort of the size of that song, and and the attention that Set Fire to the Rain has got. I remember my piano tuner coming round at times after that, and I think he thought I was the studio manager. So he came around and he said, I'm not being funny, but can you tell the guy whose studio this is, he's got to get rid of that piano. I mean, that's, and I didn't realize he thought I was the studio manager. And I was kind of taking offense because I thought it's like me going to someone's house and complaining about their furniture or something. It's not something you do. And I said, well, actually, that's my piano. I really love that old thing. It records really well. He said, well, how much does it cost? I said, I don't know. It was like £800 or something. He said, well, you should maybe look at sort of getting something a little bit more expensive, because if you're recording with it. I said, well, I don't know. I like it. He said, well, what have you recorded? I said, well, I've just done this song with this singer called Adele. He's like, what? What? You mean be Adele? I said, yeah. He said, well, what song is it? I said, Set Fire to the Rain. He said, what? That's on that piano. And then Forevermore, whenever he used to come in, he was kind of looking at it in a slightly different, way.
And he told everybody in the pub that he tuned the piano that's on that track.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm sure, like the Paul's acoustic guitar and, the start of Rolling in the Deep, it's probably in a songwriting session, pulled up the SM7.
Yeah. I mean, all the stories about that record are all about the vocal on the couch and absolutely. Yeah. And the fact that, I mean, it's easy to sort of look at Adele after that record and say, well, she's one of the most powerful people in the music business at this point and all that. But at that point, as we've pointed out, she was not the most powerful person in the music business. She needed to make her sophomore record, which is always by far the hardest record to make. And she had the balls to say, most of this record, I like the other versions of these songs. And it's really amazing that she stuck to that. And it's important that she did. So, right. Obviously it would have been nice. Could have had more mixes on that record. That'd be great. And it's fine, but it was absolutely fun. And to be honest, like the favorite thing that I mixed on the record is the cover of Love Song, the Cure track, the little bossa nova track, which really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the rest of the record. So it's, right. Yeah, obviously a big record. So, and that's a good thing. All right. We got a lot left to get to. So I want to keep plowing ahead if that's cool. Please. So we can skip over Britney Spears unless you want to talk about Britney Spears.
Well, just a great moment of just in and out, and recorded her. She was lovely, and you just get that moment where you're kind of, oh wow, this is kind of what being a top producer is like in a certain respect. You get put on a plane, and that was the first time that had ever happened, and you get picked up at the airport and straight into Conway. She's there. It's just one of those magical moments. I mean, it's not like that happens every day, but when it does, you still feel a little buzz, don't you? Of like, someone's flying, paying for me to go to America to work with this big artist. And when it's someone like Britney Spears, you don't forget it.
No, that's amazing. All right, so we can then get you. We're really skipping a lot here, but so in 2014, Sam Smith, Lily Allen, you've got a song with Kaiser Chiefs that comes out. So I don't know if this is true or not, but you seem to be a huge champion of the UK music scene. I know you were saying before about how, getting to number one in the UK doesn't necessarily mean so much, and it's about exporting things like that, but you really want UK music to be exported, because I can't believe for a second that the gigantic percentage of your work being with UK artists is only because that's just the way it happened. It seems as though that's pretty important to you too. Is that true, or did I just make that up?
No, I love UK music. I mean, the music that I can't remember each track in terms of whether it was American or English, but there's in the track that you asked me, the tracks that I love that I hadn't been part of. Mm-hmm. A lot of those are from the UK. I love the UK, but I also love my wife a lot, and my daughter a lot, and I love being in England. I really do. There's nothing against America, but I don't like being away that much. I love like the life that we have, Sarah and I, and yeah, it's a big part of that. I think that, yeah, it's a combination of
Right.
the two things. But yeah, there's something about, say, you know, you mentioned the Kaiser Chiefs. You know, I'm just such a massive fan of them because it just, there's something punky about Ricky. I'd never worked with a band that were, you know, as big as the Kaiser Chiefs before, so that was like an opportunity I really wanted to take. You know, Lily Allen is like, to me, she's a bit like the singer of the Specials, Terry Hall. You know, she has that English thing which just reminds me of that sort of lineage of singy, rappy songwriters. You know, that I
Yeah.
love. Yeah, there is a big part of the UK thing.
Well, I'd love to
And
hear a little more about the Kaiser Chiefs, just in terms of going into work with a band, because it's not, you don't usually work with bands. It seems to be a lot of one-on-one songwriting and production, and you'll build a band around them or be the band. Or so, what was that like for you, and how was it different?
it was a great experience. I mean, it was very challenging because the Kaiser Chiefs had never worked with an external songwriter, like external songwriter producer before. And they just before I started working with them, they parted company with Nick Hodgson. That was I think like the musical linchpin of the band. And Ricky Wilson, the singer, is an amazing lyricist and writes great melodies, but he's not playing the guitar, or, you know, needs someone with the rest of the band to sort of help with the music. So I was playing in this sort of role of a bit of production and working with Ricky on some melodies, and then working with the rest of the band. But, you know, like, I mean, you know this more than me, like bands, well, the Kaiser Chiefs, I think were very reticent to be working with me, because the stuff that I worked on was not necessarily, you wouldn't say that this is a guy that would work well with bands. You know, it was like I hadn't had any track record. I think I'd worked with the Kooks at that time. But yeah, you know, and they're lovely guys. I've become really good friends with them, but they're sort of tough Northerners. You know,
Right.
from like they tell you how it is. You know, they're Yorkshire guys, and they're not going to beat around the bush. So, and you can, you know, with that dynamic in a band, it's almost like you're trying to work out where the kind of energy is coming from, and what the sort of interplay is between the band members, and literally, I mean, those guys have known each other since they were at college, so they've, you know, it's like a marriage that suddenly you're coming in the middle of, and, you know, is it right to suggest like a guitar riff to Whitey, who's a great guitar player? Is it the done thing to suggest a melody, or is that like, do you let
Right.
them do it and then you kind of, so, you know, we learned a lot, and we actually I thought it would be really good to spend a bit of time on the second set of writing down at Barry Barlow's place, the Doghouse, who, I say that because I know we've been talking about Barry
Yes.
and
Yes. Yes.
your
Jethro
love of
Tull
Jethro.
drummer, for those people who don't know.
Yeah, he's a really good friend of mine, and, you know, you love his music, Andrew, and we've been talking about meeting up with Barry and going on his boat around to the pubs for many years. But hopefully
Yeah.
this summer, COVID permitting, we will be able to do that.
Yes.
But yeah, we went to a residential place. I thought that would be the thing. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I think we wrote some like, actually, some of the edgier tracks, some of the more bandy tracks, that were the tracks that we did. Like, I was kind of shocked when they said, "Oh no, we're releasing this as a single, this as a single," and they felt like way more poppy than the tracks that we'd worked on. I was kind of really wanting to do like the up tempo, like the old school Kaiser Chiefs type of stuff,
Yeah.
which, you know, to me is like the sweet spot of that band. So yeah, I've formed a great relationship with all those guys, and Ricky in particular. We're working on a project at the minute, which is not out yet, but as an exciting thing, and, you know, talk to Peanut, and Simon a lot from the band. So it was just a great experience. There's something brilliant about working with bands where you just really feel like part of the band. You know, you must have felt that a lot.
Yeah,
It's just like
absolutely. It's the reason to make records for me. And you know, I don't record a whole lot anymore, so I really do miss it. But it's the best. It's the best thing. So, but how did you end up working with them then? Because it sounds like they really weren't into the idea at the beginning. So who put that together?
I think it was a combination of the record company and their manager, James Sandham. And I think that, you know, just looking for just a different thing,
Right.
I guess. And as a writer producer that had done the things that I'd done, I guess the combination, I mean, ultimately it worked because I think we did like 4 tracks on that record, and yeah, they were good. We went to see them live, and they sound great. They sound great live. But I think, I don't know, at that point I was really like amassing as much experience as I could, because it's not like I was far from like an overnight success, but I'd had these kind of records. I didn't feel like that accomplished, you know, as a producer. So I worked with Jesse and Joy, for example, this amazing duo from Mexico, you know, who are just huge in South America, like some of the biggest, you know, the biggest artists out there, and loved working with them. You know, did like half a record. Martin Terefi did like the other half, and just had such a great time with them. But just learned so much about like recording percussion and Jesse's guitars, and like getting into like recording someone else's guitars. So yeah, I was kind of like learning, and also a bit in no man's land, because I think people were expecting for me to be like this sort of hit machine,
Right.
that was, you know, off the back of like the Tinchy stuff, and then Tayo going to #1, and then Adele going to #1. But I kind of felt like I had to sort of not retreat, but just like forge my own way a little bit, and just to amass experience, which I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah.
But I also wasn't, I mean, I don't know if you're the same, but I don't feel any entitlement to like this really long career in the music industry, because I know how.
God, no, it could end tomorrow.
Yeah, so I always kind of feel like the last thing I've done is maybe my last thing, as not in a sort of macabre way, but just in terms of like, you've got to sort of fight for the right
To party.
to do it. Yeah, to do your next record. It's I don't know. So there sort of came a point where I was like, well, maybe you know, the Grammy, that was it. And then so I formed a publishing company and put a lot of effort into like mentoring young writers, and thought maybe that was the thing. And then yeah, it was kind of not too sure what the next step was. I wasn't really meeting that many artists that were new artists that were kind of doing it for me. And then Kano came back, and I'd worked with Kano over the years, but he said he wanted to write, in his words, like his equivalent of Jay-Z's Black Album, you know, very, very personal and very intimate. And this was at a point where UK rap was like absolutely dead in the water. You know, no one was, kind of DJ culture was prevalent, and people had so much respect for Kano because he's a brilliant artist, but no one was rushing to sign him. So he was unsigned, and I was just really wanted to work with him, and loved the fact there was no pressure, and we could just make a really honest record together. So that was Made in the Manor.
Right.
And that was made over the course of about a year. And that came out, and that did really well. And it just started this kind of, you know, as well as other artists as well, but could feel there was this sort of swell of interest again in UK rap music. And obviously because I'd worked with Kano over the years, but had the success of Tinchy and done lots of other stuff, I guess then when Stormzy heard about the stuff that I'd done and we met, then that sort of felt like a natural pairing, I guess.
Right. Now, there's one artist I want to ask you about before we get to Stormzy, which is Mickey Echo, who is on your record. I think possibly my favorite track on your record, which we haven't even talked about yet. The fact that you put a record out as an artist, basically, and on your label, etc. But you worked with Mickey before Stormzy, and I'm just curious about, because I was not aware of Mickey at all, and then I started delving into the catalog, and just so talented.
He's amazing. He's amazing. So Mickey and I started working, I guess, like 2015, and immediately hit it off. You know, we just had this bromance as guys, just got on so well, and wrote great music. And then he wrote the song with Rihanna, Stay, which is this huge track, and performed at the Grammys. And I didn't see him for a while, and then we saw each other again, and he was trying to finish his record. And again, I took him, like the Kaiser Chiefs suggested, that we go out of London and went to, we had a house at the time on the river near Henley, just up the road from Barry, in fact. And just went down there, and I know he'd been put in those really high pressured LA sessions, and it's kind of, people wanting him to churn out the hits and give them kind of 5 more variations of Stay,
Right.
And he's a pure, true artist. There's no way that he was going to do that. So we just came and we just kicked back and wrote some acoustic tracks, and they both went on the record. And one was called Time, which became the title of his first record. And he's just one of those guys, those guys that you think, I will always create with this guy. He's such a interesting, daring, creative. And so, having worked on his first record, I then heard I don't know if that was his second record or maybe his third record, but whatever his latest record is, and I was just blown away by it. And I just loved the fact that he was, it kind of sounded a little bit kind of early Radiohead into like Paranoid Android, Radiohead, and just loved it. And I gave him a call just to congratulate him on the record. And then as my record was forming, I thought, I need to work with him again. I'm
right.
So bad
All right. Well, we're definitely going to get to your record, but we got 2 big things to talk about first. So Stormzy, off you go, because it was a big undertaking.
It was a big undertaking. The interesting thing was that I Made in the Manor hadn't been out that long, and that was so dear to me as a record as Kano is to an artist. Stormzy came in, and this incredible personality and huge smile, and was saying about his vision for the record. And I think immediately, the idea of working with another rapper after Kano, I felt like I put so much into Made in the Manor that I'm not someone that can just repeat the same thing over again. So I felt like maybe the Stormzy thing with, his album was something obviously I was super excited about, but I was also thinking I really don't want to repeat what I'd done with Kano, but I realized that soon, that within 5 minutes of meeting Stormzy, that his record was going to be so different. He was talking about gospel choirs and the gang sounds and prayer concept that he had, and that immediately I could just hear what he was talking about, with the gang signs being the beats and the basses, the sub basses, but then the prayer being the choir and the harps, and I could just feel that there was so much that I could give to this project. And we did an initial week to see how we'd get on, and I brought in some of my friends, some session players, and we wrote some songs together, and we talked a lot. And it was clear, I think, from the beginning of that first week, I think we wrote Cigarettes and Kush and Blinded by Your Grace Part 1 together in that time, as well as a few other songs, that it was really working. And then we said, okay, let's get together now for a longer period of time. And I think in the end it was probably about a year that we spent together. That was an amazing period of my life.
And when you're doing a record like that, are you doing other things in between, or do you just immerse yourself in that project?
Well, with this, I was really immersing myself in it. I mean, I think from a kind of cash flow point of view. I was just so used to juggling projects, and also really, to be honest, from a love of music point of view. You know, I mean, there were the early days where the mortgage had to be paid, but you know, then I think I'd reached the point where I was very happy working on one project. But Stormzy, there was a point where he sort of went away for like a little bit. I think he had some shows, or there was something that was going. I think he was like reevaluating things. He sort of reached the halfway point in the record, and I got a chance of working with Dave on his first EP at that point. I think it was quite good for me to get a little bit of distance. And then Stormzy started up again, and Damon Albarn asked me to come and work with him to finish his record, which was like the hardest decision. It was basically, I said no like a couple of times, which was the hardest decision I think I've ever had to make in music, because I'm such a huge fan of Damon. But we eventually worked out that we could actually work with each other if we worked before 1 o'clock, because there was no way that Stormzy was going to be in the studio before 1, because he's a bit of a night owl. And actually Damon is similar to me in that he gets up really, really early in the morning. So I said, well, look, if I cycle over to your studio and I'm there for 9 in the morning, maybe we could do like 3 hours. I could cycle back and then meet Stormzy. So we did that for like 6 weeks. That was a really good. And what was great about that was that was like a gift sent from above, because I realized that being really focused on a record, then suddenly working on someone else's record, but especially when it's Damon Albarn that's just released so many brilliant records, and seeing his process, but helping him on his journey, he actually just helped me way more, I think, than I probably helped him, but just through putting yourself out there to do something that you wouldn't normally have done because of the time constraints was actually a real blessing, because I just picked up so many tricks from him and was so grateful to be working.
And what was he looking for from you?
He was looking for like a sort of exec, but someone that was like I mean, Damon's not, you know, he's an anarchist. He wouldn't have someone from the record company coming down to,
of course not,
you know, and that's cool. I think we'd worked together on the Kano record before. He knew that I was a big fan of his. Yeah, I think he just had an instinct that I could come down and just be really brutally honest with him, which I could be, because I didn't have the time to be anything but. So, you know, if there was only like one chorus in the song, I'd sort of get in and actually, you know, work with his engineer to say, well, we could do that, but then maybe the kick drum we can replace that, and we can, you know, just really kind of get in the trenches. And that was just an amazing 6 weeks, you know. And Damon would be like recording some vocals, or, you know, so it was a kind of a very much a big picture job, but there was also, I guess, just it's being like a third party that wasn't part of the process, and actually just having some kind of objectivity to it. And it was, yeah, one of the most, as I said, one of the most amazing gifts that.
Yeah, and it's also, it's sort of the opposite of your role on the Stormzy.
Absolutely,
record.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely came into play as a great thing. And yeah, I think when you're surrounded by greatness in Damon's studio, you know, from him, but also the other members of the Gorillaz, you know, it's a serious thing they've got going there, you know. So yeah, it was like a dream come true working with them. But then, yeah, getting back into the flow with Stormzy was very open-ended from a writing point of view to producing, to taking some of the amazing beats that Stormzy had amassed from other producers, and then working on them a little bit on the sonics, and then working with the live instrumentation to make sure that all gelled, and then bringing it all together. And we spent a long time on the track listing. And yeah, I mean, Stormzy's ideas, I think, were just incredible. I think looking back from a songwriting point of view, but also from the way that he tells the narrative, his own narrative, I think is just, and the features and the way that he envisaged it coming together, and the way that we really went in on it. And I was just so pleased that, as you always are, you know, when you spent a long time and poured your soul into something, that it does connect. Because there was a point where I thought, you know, people could really pan this if they wanted.
Right.
He's going out on a limb, you know, he's saying how much he loves his mum. He's been very open about his faith. He's talking about his mental health. I mean, it's so brutally honest.
Yeah.
I thought if there's one guy that can do that, it's going to be Stormzy, because he's so truthful in his delivery. But still, I wondered whether the kind of gatekeepers of the rap community could kind of sneer at someone being so honest.
Right.
But everyone just seemed to get behind it, which is testament to Stormzy's art.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, what I love about it is obviously there's some very hard-hitting stuff. There's some messages that are a little harder to deal with, but there are just moments of pure joy on it, which you don't necessarily expect. And I think that really connects with people. It certainly does with me, because I don't do a huge amount of listening in the genre. It's just not what I listen to. But that record has so many moments which have nothing to do with genre. And obviously he's a great artist as well. But it really does uplift as you listen and as you get through it. And it's a big thing. And I was actually really surprised because you said I don't remember where it was, but you were talking about the record, and again, talking about the time you'd spend on the track listing and really saying like, okay, this is the record. But the very last track on the record came in kind of last minute, right?
On Gangsta's Breath.
Yeah. Was it on that one or was it on a different one? I got that backwards. I thought it was on.
Yeah. Well,
I could be making that up.
No, that's really good research, Andrew. We always knew that the last track was going to be the last track that we wrote and produced. And Stormzy wanted it to feel like it was, you know, like he'd given all that he could give. So it wasn't like a kind of freak, there's a track out of the blue. There was always space for it on the whiteboard.
Right.
But it was always going to be this sort of point where, I don't know, we just knew was going to be a 3 a.m. vocal to finish, and there were a few people in the studio. It was a kind of a real moment, that actually to you know, we knew at the point where we knew we got the final vocal, you know. And I was walking back. I was in London at the time and living in London, and I remember walking back, and yeah, the sun's almost coming up, and you're like, it really felt like we completed the record at that point, which is a great feeling.
And then it came out like an hour and a half later or something. It was a really quick turnaround, wasn't it?
It was a real quick turnaround. I mean, the thing I think for us was that so few people had heard the record at that point. I mean, it was literally Stormzy, myself, a couple of Stormzy's friends, and Manon, my engineer. I mean, literally, like, that was all it was. So we then had to play it to Stormzy's A&R, Twin, and then like some other people. Twin loved it. And he was the one that put us together in the first place. But he hadn't been down. You know, it wasn't like like the A&Rs usually come down at certain points. So we were really trusting. Well, Stormzy put his trust in me, and I put my trust in him. You know, and ultimately, you know, the narrative completely driven by him that I believed in. You know, and I think that when you feel, you know, you have a little team, even if it's 2 people, and you trust each other, then you can sometimes do some cool things. So yeah, but it was a bit nerve wracking, because we thought, when you're in that bubble of being in the studio, I don't know if you've ever have you felt that before, where you kind of, this feels really good in the studio, and I really believe in it, but I haven't really referenced it against that much else, and I'm like, this feels great, but maybe other people won't agree with me, you know?
Yeah, well, every record I mix, that's exactly how I feel. Yeah, but obviously that one resonated big time. Now, I got a very specific question about it, though. XTC credited as a writer. What XTC sample is in there? I cannot find it, and I know their catalog pretty well. So maybe this is just an all-music blip, but
that's good because, yeah, well, I think I'll have to. We'll have to get back to you on that one.
All right.
No,
it's certainly not obvious.
No, there's not. There wasn't anything that I was aware of.
No, I mean, maybe it was something in one of the beats you ended up using, or but yeah, there are no obvious like lifts from anything.
No, but well, it's interesting. I'll do my digging on that.
Yeah, well, like I say, it's probably just the internet.
I love it, as well. Yeah.
So you mentioned Dave, so we should talk about Dave.
Yeah. I mean, again, like being careful of repeating myself. I knew I wasn't repeating myself with Dave because he's so different to Stormzy and so different to Kane. Plays piano, which to me was like a joy, being able to jam with him. And by the time, it was actually like the most wonderful kind of dovetail of events where the Stormzy record came out. It was doing well. I'd already produced, co-produced, exec, whatever you want to call it, Dave's first 2 EPs. Then I think there was another EP that we did, and then we went into the album to work on the album. So that was another joy. I mean, I literally felt like, the best artists were coming to me, and Dave's history of being this, very talented kid his both brothers were locked up for crimes, and so being without his brothers, his dad isn't around, unfortunately, and so his mum was having to work two jobs, and his mum was very worried about him getting into gang culture in South London, so used to, I think, like keep him in a lot. And through that, he had a keyboard, and his love of kind of classical music came from playing games like Zelda and hearing these amazing scores from the Xbox games, and then just trying to learn them from that. So like, wow. He's an amazing classical pianist. But if you said, what's your favorite Bach piece or Mozart, he just, probably now. I mean, but certainly at the time, he was like, I don't know. This is the theme from Zelda. This
right?
Amazing.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, yeah, our relationship, by the time we came to make Dave's first record, was already very strong. And I've met his mom and one of his brothers, and yeah, we'd done some really good things, Manon and myself, Manon as engineer, and me producing and working with a couple of the other guys, Terrell 169, another great producer called Kyle, that young producer that Dave works with. So yeah, we had this kind of family thing going on, and came to write the first record. And I think that the power of a concept was something that Dave really, appreciated. He's a natural storyteller. So to see what Kane had done on Made in the Manor and Stormzy had done on Gang Signs and Prayer, I think was important for him to come up with a narrative as well on psychodrama. So he really worked hard at that, and we sculpted it together, and kind of very different from the Stormzy experience because they're very different artists. So I guess my role is always going to be different depending on the type of artist, but equally as gratifying. I guess the differences were that our musical relationship is slightly different in that Stormzy doesn't play an instrument, but we have a sort of almost telepathic sort of relationship in that, I'm trying to second guess what he means, and we usually get there by like just him giving me the wildest references, whereas Dave will sit down at the piano and we'll jam. So lots of that record came from live jamming, even the string parts which Rosie Danvers arranged, but I recorded Dave's. We recorded a very rough sketch of Leslie, which I think is like a 11-12 minute song. This whole amazing song on domestic abuse, and we sort of jammed the strings over the top of that, so that became like the string part. So different musically, but yeah, an incredible journey, and then to see that record do so well as well. And when he, both, well, all three of the three that I've mentioned, Kano, Stormzy, and Dave, had honestly just been so pure in their intention.
Mm-hmm.
So see that come through. I mean, you must feel that with the artists on your label, Andrew. There's a very pure intention, isn't there, that to the music that you sign.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at this point it's really just Low Roar, but absolutely, the albums are only about the albums. There's never any other thought about anything, and like we're just kind of getting going. Well, he's actually finished writing and recording his bits on the 5th record, and it's just such an exciting thing to have a batch of songs that you can see where they're going to go, and you're going to take them there, and then no one's going to tell you, well, no, do it more like that. Like, we only tell each other things. So it's a very privileged to be in that way. But we can't come off of Dave without talking about the Brit Awards performance, because that's a big deal. First of all, you performing live on television for the first time in quite a while, right?
It's the first time I'd ever performed piano,
which
was terrifying. So yeah, Dave wanted me to be there, I think, as a sort of rock, I think, for him in some ways musically, because we've done so much stuff together. But I think maybe to show, the fact that we were up there, that we'd written this song together, and that obviously threw up many emotions for me, because just the fact of being white and being part of this song, and in the musical sense, the narrative is obviously all Dave, but to be so privileged to be part of that song. I mean, talk about imposter syndrome right there. You really have to question, but also just feeling so grateful to be included. But then the upsetting thing, I think, was to then feel so included in that song, and then to feel how music is so inclusive, but then how exclusive society is. So it was, I remember when someone asked me on the day of the Ivor Novellos, whenever you win, I mean, I was lucky to win one with Dave for a track that we wrote 2 years before, and then we were awarded the Ivor Novello for Black, and someone said, how did it make you feel? And it was a really interesting day, because I mean, we admittedly didn't have the wonderful awards ceremony because we were in lockdown, so that obviously took the edge off. But it was mixed emotions, because I think around about the time of George Floyd, and there's so much going on that you felt like the world is so far from perfect and is so divided. Yet I was feeling so connected on that day, to Dave and to everything that he was saying, and so it was mixed emotions on that track. Obviously from the micro level, pure joy, but then just seeing how the world is, you're left in a slightly kind of colder state of mind. But the performance was one of the most mind-blowing experiences of my life, because when Dave went into that third verse, which no one had really ever heard You know, he couldn't tell people. You know, the Brits were very keen to know like every single word as would be. And the TV company that, you know, they were, but I think Dave gave them a dummy verse or something, you know, and then
good for him,
you know, and just to be up there and just to feel that wave of energy come through when he went into the last verse and was talking about Jack Merritt and you know, the Windrush generation and everything that song represents, and to actually be up there with him on stage was, yeah, like a unbelievably emotional time. You just know that you're doing something which, well, Dave was doing something that was really helping the cause, you know, and was really saying something, and just to be on that stage was one of the most amazing moments of my life. And then to subsequently come off and see people's reactions, and to see how that was sort of heralded as, well, people call it one of the best performances ever, you know, to see also Dave's growth from this like 17-year-old through to this like fully fledged adult who's writing in this way and performing in this way is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's on YouTube, and for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's the Brit Awards performance of Black, and definitely watch it. And I mean, purely just from a production standpoint, he's a genius for making you be on stage so he could stand up, because you can't deliver that verse sitting down playing piano. You cannot do it. He needed to. It's perfect. And I think I love that your reaction to being included in it is what it is, because it is. Look, I'm not going to say it's hard to be a white man. It's very, very easy to be a white man, and we both know that. But it's hard to be a slightly aware white man and try and do things, because it's really difficult. And so to be able to be a part of something like that, and just you are part of it because you helped make it happen, I think is pretty powerful and pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think that maybe the size of what was going on was I obviously realized it was a huge moment culturally, but I had to try and put that in the back of my mind a little bit, because the piano line is, you know, it's kind of classical line. It's not that difficult to play, but under pressure it is, because it's all octaves.
It's moving, like yeah.
It's just, and it's also very exposed because, you know, it's really the pianos and the strings. So yeah, it was one of those things I'm looking around the studio now, because I remember coming in and we had the two pianos set up back to back as they were going to be, and Dave would come in and we'd practice, and then he'd leave, and I was like, I'd wake up at like 5 o'clock the next morning and like with the metronome, and literally time even like the walk up to the piano to get it going. I mean, I know it, you know, it doesn't sound that cool, you know, it's
no,
way cool.
That's
you know, we just learn it and that was it. But I mean, the hours that we put in was
art is not easy. Art takes work. So, and that was brilliantly done. So look, one more thing before we get to your record, and then obviously if I've left anything out you want to talk about, just bring it up and we'll do it. But I want to talk about the come on, I have it written down, which is the Radio 1 cover of the Foo Fighters song, Times Like These, that you put together. Yeah, I want to hear, because you talk about it, and then I've always got thoughts, but it's brilliant. Again, for people who've not seen it, just Google it. It's on YouTube, and it's easy to like, oh, we'll do an all-star version of something and we'll raise a bunch of money, which it raised a bunch of money. But it's difficult to do something like that and have it be so joyful and heart-wrenching at the same time, but be exactly what it needs to be. And I'd love to hear about the way you put it together.
Well, it's kind of neat to say the nice things about it. I mean, I was in the middle of, well, about 80% through my record, and I got a call from a lovely man called Chris Price, who runs Radio 1 and 1 Extra, and told me about the record. And yeah, we talked. It wasn't, to me, as you said, sometimes the charity records can be challenging because we've heard, there is a way of sort of doing them. But I think what was great about it was that because of the limitations of what we could do in terms of everyone being locked down here, we knew that we had to approach it in a different way, and we wanted to anyway because it's live lounge, so therefore it should feel different. We definitely weren't going to do it like the great version of the original Times Like These, Foo Fighters. So we referenced actually the Paul McCartney, Rihanna and Kanye track 4 or 5 seconds, in that it still feels hip, but it's got it's kind of like campfire rap. It still feels cool, but and I think that the thing that was most important was the first letter that went out to the artist, which was that this is not about who's got the best. This is not Live Aid. This is not who's got the best section. This is do what you can do, sing it down, sing a section you like, and I'll put it together, and we've got your back. We'll make you sound good. If you can sing into the phone, send us a voice note. If you've got a mic, sing into the mic. If you want to bang a saucepan, play an acoustic guitar. So I did a kind of mock up the bare bones of the track with some percussion here and play guitar. And the first person up actually who really gave it the kind of royal send off was Taylor Hawkins. Mm-hmm. So he heard the original and he's so. Have you ever worked with Taylor?
Yeah, only once, but yeah, great guy.
Great guy, great energy, great vibe. And he was like, okay, so I'm going to do this and I'm going to play the lava lamp and then I'm going to play, I'll give you this and I'll play, you may not want the drums, but I'll give you some drums, and all home recorded. So that set it off really well. And obviously, we were able to go to some of the bigger artists like Dua Lipa and Chris Martin to let them know that, this had Taylor Hawkins on it. And and obviously everyone was really supportive because it was Radio 1 and everyone loves Radio 1 because it's such a great institution of British culture. It has been and hopefully always will. But then the parts started to come in, and they were wildly differently recorded. There were some voice notes and there were some recordings with the cats in the background and the dogs barking and the traffic. And then Chris Martin sent his recording in, which was really well recorded. You could tell that he was obviously in a place that he was used to recording. But lots of artists don't record themselves. And so then they were also sending in at the same time clips of themselves recording it so we could put the video together. And we pieced it together through well, not really any trickery. It was kind of just, I've got a wonderful UTA Unfairchild compressor here that is not a shameless, well, it is a shameless plug, but I mean, I love Eric Valentine and those guys and have so much of their gear here. And I just found that, you could run a voice note through this thing and you just put it through 16 valves and it does something pretty magical, like the original would. So I found that, taking the vocals and processing them through similar chains, but with radically different EQ, mm-hmm. worked well. And I think, sometimes it's the difference in the recordings that make these things sound so unique. And we had all sorts of percussion playing on there, and then at the 11th hour we managed to get it over to Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters manager, and Dave was in Hawaii and he was I think he lives next door to Greg Kirsten in Hawaii. They've both got houses there, and he said, right, I'm gonna tell me what you want to do and I'll go and sing it. And so literally the day before it was coming out and I was mixing it here, we got the Dave Grohl vocal and this lovely email from Dave saying how much he loved the track, and it was just an absolute joy. So Dave sings. I think he comes in on the second verse, and then mm-hmm. and then goes into the last chorus. And yeah, it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And obviously it did raise, I think, £2 million for the frontline workers here. It really did do
brilliant
some good. And I think we were all feeling kind of very helpless at the point where we were all locked down. So yeah, to me, that was just an absolute gift to be able to do something that helped, in the small way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, you guys and 100-year-old man going around his back garden raised as much money for the NHS as everything else combined. It's amazing. Yeah. So, but it's a beautiful track to listen to. It really is. It's like I say, it's easy for that to be a throwaway, but it raises money and it's got people on it. And I think that you're absolutely right that the disparity in the recordings is what makes it, because it's very personal. Everyone's performance, well, Paloma's performance is insane with her sequin dress and things. But I mean, it's all very personal. Everybody's smiling. It's, it's a very lighthearted but serious thing, and it's great. Really, really well done.
No, it's the first track that I had actually released out of this new studio, so it was a little bit of trepidation, and then it went to number one, and just literally to be able to hear something that you went next door, and we got an old Roberts radio that we all gathered around to the radio to listen to, and to hear it come out of the analog radio, just felt great. It felt like a lovely way to christen the studio.
That's great. And I love that it's Radio 1's first number one on Radio 1.
Yeah, it's like and the guys, we got so close, the whole team, Andy and Andy Rogers, who's the head tech.
Yes, I wanted to mention, the only other thing I wanted to mention about is Andy Rogers has a credit at the end of the video, and I've dealt with him many times doing like Chili Peppers stuff at festivals and things, and he's amazing. Such a good guy.
Great guy. And also, can't forget Phil, who made the video, who was working with Radio 1 at the time, who is just, I think that to see that visual, the way that he put that together with the music, I think it was great that we were working so much as a team, and that we were able to send him bits and he was able to then piece all the visuals together. But he did it in such a skillful way that it becomes the video is like its own narrative. Obviously, we knew that was going to be a really important part of the puzzle, but he really, you just get that lovely feeling, don't you, when you get to the end of it, and you've seen everyone from Rag and Bone Man to Dua Lipa to Chris Martin to Dave Grohl, to Taylor tapping his lava lamp. It's really good vibes.
Yeah. Yeah, and what people needed at the time and still need now for at least the next 4, 5, 7, 9 months or whatever it's going to be. So, yeah. All right. I think we've gotten to your record now, if you want, because you have put out a record. It came out, last October? Is that right?
October 23rd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell the kids about your record, which is not under your name. So you kind of need to know to look for it.
Okay, so it's under the name of Future Utopia, and the record's called 12 Questions. And the concept of the record is that I am asking 12 questions. So questions such as fear or faith, how much is enough, what's the cost of freedom, and amongst others. And the concept is that I've gone around the world when I was able to go around the world. I've asked the most diverse, wonderful, eclectic group of activists, artists, poets, rappers, singers to give me their answers to these huge questions. And the result is 12 Questions by Future Utopia, which is this big musical stew. I mean, the music is really me wearing my heart on my sleeve. So it borders from, I think, as an overall sonic, I was going for Pink Floyd meets MGMT with hip hop drums and Steely Dan horns.
You have achieved that.
I don't know if that's in any way been achieved. But
yeah,
that was what.
yeah, I would definitely. Yeah.
It was a pretty wild. Even when I say it, it sounds pretty wild. But you know, all my influences that I hadn't been able to really put onto records where I'd worked with other people, and you know, those influences, I knew for sure that there was no point. I didn't even really have this yearning to make my own record. I just wanted to do something that I'd never done before and to really like scare myself. And I think that the form of it, I knew it was going to be a project. I felt like at the end of Kano and Stormzy and Dave that, you know, good luck comes in threes. I'd be pushing it to, and there was just no one else really that was coming to the fore that was yeah. I mean, you just, people like Dave aren't born, you know, every minute. I was just feeling very lucky to have worked on those 3 records. So feeling kind of anxious about the world and about the environment and about the wealth gap and AI and all of these type of issues that surround us. This was pre-COVID, by the way. I wrote down the questions on a whiteboard. It was as my studio was being built, and I thought, is this a Netflix documentary? Is it a film? Is it a? And then I thought, you know what, this could be like the best album you've ever made. You know, so that's what it's become, and I honestly think that it is the best record that I've ever made. It's the most honest because it's me musically. I've obviously chosen the artists that I've collaborated with. I've sought out people like Albert Woodfox, the Black Panther that was incarcerated for 43 years in a 6 by 3 feet cell. I asked him, what's the cost of freedom? I asked the poet laureate, Simon Armitage, do we really care? And he came with an amazing response for that. And so I went around recording the artists and then put the music underneath. So it's at times quite cinematic and at times hard hitting, because there's some of the people you'd expect to be on there. There's people like Getz, there's Dave on a track. I've asked him, why are we divided when we're so connected? And the result was a song that we both wrote called Children of the Internet. There's Ez Devlin on there, the incredible large scale performative sculptor that also by the way designs all the sets for Adele, Kanye and The Weeknd. It's an amazing artist and human. So I did it. I spent a year and really pulled everything out of myself from a musical and a soulful way. I learned so much from the answers and became a very different person by the end of it, because I think when you put yourself out there and you change for the better. And I really had to step up to the sort of title of artist. You know, I didn't take that lightly, and it wasn't something that, or it's not something that does come easily, but it's something that making your own music is, to me now, it's kind of like a drug. Kano asked me just after I released the record, he said, you know, what are you going to do now? Is this like one thing that you're going to do? And I didn't really have the answer, but the longer that this record's has been out, and it's only been out a few months, the more I feel like I'm not sure if I'm able to produce other artists now, because I'm just in a different space. I feel like I would do my thing, and it's an interesting one.
But I'm sure that an artist will present themselves to you, and you'll be right back in the wanting to help them do their thing. I mean, I could be totally wrong, but it feels like, especially with the 3 artists you mentioned, they showed up, you didn't want to repeat yourself, and realized immediately you weren't going to, because their vision was so strong and so different. And I can't imagine that you wouldn't be inspired by that all over again. But who knows? Maybe this is it.
I think I enjoyed the making of 12 Questions, and I've enjoyed the reaction to it, which has been so positive, that when you've got concepts in your head, I think certainly in the next few years anyway, I feel like they need to come out.
Right.
And I need to keep pushing, because I feel like I've just sort of opened Pandora's box, but in a good way.
Well, and I love the fact that you base the concept of the album is on these 12 questions, but you are the artist, but the artist only asks the questions, and the guest artists answer them however they want to answer them, and there's no agenda to the record. When you ask like what's important, and it's a breakup song basically, like, well, that's what was important to that artist, and you're not preaching. You're just pointing out that we've got a lot of shit we need to find out about. And speaking of Getz, I got to say, I watched the interview that you did with him for, was it Vanity Fair or something like that? It was
Esquire.
For Esquire, yeah. That's worth, I mean, obviously the interview is really good, but he's very well spoken. At the end, when he's claiming to be confused, it's one of the most lucid descriptions of how I feel that I've heard in a long time, and that's worth looking up, I think.
And I have to give him a plug. His records, don't know when it's coming out, but it's very soon. But the new Getz record is because I've heard it, absolutely incredible. It's gonna be a big thing. So yeah, I urge everybody listening to this to check out Getz.
Excellent. So I was going to make a joke asking you about Leicester, because you're a huge supporter of Leicester, but I don't actually watch football, so I don't have any idea what's going on.
What was the joke? So, what was the joke?
No, not even a joke. I was just going to bring it up, and then I had nothing to say. So we've just done that joke.
Well, I mean, riding high at the minute again, third in the Premier League.
All right. Well, there you go. So times are good.
Times are very good. Yeah, it's slightly weird watching the games. We've got season tickets, so Sarah and I drive up to go and see them a lot when they're playing at home. But yeah, you have to come up with this.
I would love to. I was. Someone had threatened to take me to a match, and then they got sick, and I didn't get to go. And then I'm hoping, because of where I am, that I can go see the Wolves at one point, because I'm not that far. I know. I don't get mad. I got friends who are big supporters, so
It's fair. No, they're strong. They're strong.
I saw the look on your face, though. Like, no.
Gotta come and see the real thing.
All right, I'll come see the real thing. I want to ask you about one more thing, and then maybe we'll have Mark come in and do some questions, if that's cool. But I wanted to ask you about something specific, which you can also say, well, there's nothing really to talk about. But so this company, Hipgnosis, that has been buying everybody's catalog on the planet, it seems. Mm-hmm. And I saw that you'd done a deal with them, and I don't, the ins and outs of the deal, I don't care at all. But the first thing was that it looked to me like they're buying the writer's side of things, not the publishing side of things, which seems interesting. And I'm just curious, because I don't write, so this isn't something for me. But I think a lot of the people who watch this are young songwriters or artists in their own right. And you've done publishing deals, and now you've done the deal with Hipgnosis. I'm just wondering if you have anything you want to say about the difference between owning your own thing and the advantages of signing these deals. Because some people look at, especially publishing deals, as like, well, it's a way to get some cash. But obviously that cash is an advance against future earnings, and there are ups and downs to it. So as a songwriter with a real catalog, I'm just curious what your take is on all of this.
I think first thing to say is that the whole team at Hipgnosis are incredible music people. Merck, I've known for a long time through Nile Rodgers, and is just such a visionary, and is such an incredible guy, and it feels like a real, if he's watching the gate of the catalogs that come in, the catalogs are in very safe hands with Merck and the team, and Amy and Ted over there at Hipgnosis. So that's the first thing to say. I think anyone that does a deal with Hipgnosis you obviously want to make sure that your catalog is in good hands for years and years to come. But I think, and I mean, this is only my view on these kind of deals, but I think you look at, the value of what's happening at this present moment. There is a high value on intellectual property, and you look at where you are and your goals financially, and you look at the kind of deals that you can do across the board, and you look at, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's, I'm not saying there's any one way to do it. I think you have to look at your own. I mean, I remember when I did my first publishing deal, it enabled me to buy the flat that I was able to record Typical Me in, and that, some people would say, well, why did you do that deal? You could have done this. It was like, because it enabled me to further what I wanted to do. And the hypnosis deal has enabled me to do certain other things. And it's all about moving forward at whatever point. I mean, if some people have different views on it. It's never sell your catalog, and the view for me is that, that my kind of the legacy in terms of what I passed down to our daughter and our relations is important to me, but also they probably want to enjoy some of that whilst I was alive, and yeah, there's lots of different ways you can look at it philosophically, but I think that, like with anything, it's you build a house, or you buy a house, and that there comes a point where that street that you're living in that maybe wasn't so lucrative at the time becomes like the street, and someone wants to make you a deal on that, and you think, well, actually this will enable me to go and do this, and
right,
and go and live here. And I think I am quite philosophical about it, I think, and there will be other deals to be done in the future, and I think it's a part of going to become a part of life now, which is kind of exciting, because I think if you can build up the catalog with as much great songs, you're going to be in a position where you have the option. You can do a deal for part of that catalog, which is what we did, the whole catalog, or not. And it's ultimately, do you want the money now, or do you want the money later?
Right. So you're just going to blow it all on drugs, though, right?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've done that already. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Spend a lot.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
No, I know it's a really personal question in a way, but it's also one that I think a lot of people struggle with, because and I think that the way you let off your answer is very important, is that it matters who you're selling to.
That's very important, because I think if it was a sort of faceless company, I think that Merck is, I mean, look at the people he's managed, look at his career in music, and he's not just this sort of face that is, I mean, he is so personally, I mean, in a metaphysical way, invested in this, because that he's a very safe set of hands, and I mean that matters a lot. I mean, it must matter, because why are so many people with catalogs far huger than mine doing business with him?
Yeah, tons.
Neil Young cannot be short of money, and Lindsey Buckingham does not need to do this deal with Merck. So and I think it's nice to feel that, the people that had done deals with Merck before we talked to Merck, I knew we were in good hands. They were good people, and everyone does the due diligence, and everyone looks into it. And you talk to your accountants, and it's the thing is with artists that there isn't a paycheck, there isn't a pension, there isn't a weekly thing. And I think that if you want to follow your heart, you want to be able to take creative risks, and Merck and that deal has enabled me to do that.
Yeah,
I'm not having to do the bread and butter stuff, which, to be honest, I didn't at the beginning of my career. I needed to do for experience and to pay the mortgage. But I'm in a period now where I can hopefully be something of a visionary, and actually I have a musical voice, and I'm able to create music where I can invite artists onto records, and I can go on little journeys myself, musically, and I think that to buy myself that opportunity is actually priceless.
Yeah. Excellent. Right on. Well, if you're up for it, should we bring Mark in and get some questions?
Where is Mark? What's he been doing?
He's been lurking the whole time. He just lurks. He lurks.
Lurks in that studio with the
yeah, right? Here he comes.
Just lurking with the logo.
Hey, dude.
This has been amazing. Great. Thank you for doing this. So much fun. Everybody's having a blast in the chat room and everything too.
That's happening. Are they the standard AirPods or the AirPods Max?
They are the second generation ones.
Okay.
So
Hey, just thinking about that, about spatial audio. This is probably another time, but Andrew, what's your take on spatial? Is this going to be a whole new? Is this the future?
I think here's my quick take on this. Is that obviously since the 70s they've been trying to do it. Like quadraphonic was a big deal. My Neve console was quadraphonic because that was going to be the next big thing. Then 5.1, blah 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 blah. All of the formats up until now have required playback systems at home that people did not own. So people are listening to 5.1 records in their home theater, which was like 3 point nothing, and they weren't sitting in the middle, and it's a totally different speaker setup. But with the spatial audio and the binaural playback, these things are actually viable right now. And I am like that close to being set up for Atmos. So you heard it here first, that I'm almost definitely going to be setting up for that. Because I think, first of all, for me, and like the low roar records, if you've heard those are like made for Atmos. They're very spacious. There's no sort of band thing where you have to worry about who's going to be where. You can put stuff anywhere you want. So I can't wait to just play with it. But I've heard, I've done some mixing myself, because you can do it just in binaural mode, even without owning any extra speakers and things like that. And I've done a lot of messing around with it. And it's obviously not the same as sitting in amongst a ton of speakers, but it is still a totally different listening experience, and you can fly things around. And so I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but I think this has a much stronger chance of becoming a thing than any other surround format has had, because it does not rely upon monitoring environments that people don't have. Everybody's got headphones. Everybody on the planet, basically. So the fact that they're more active phones than people, right? That's the thing. So everyone with the phones got the headphones or earbuds or something, so they can at least attempt to experience this. So it's pretty exciting, I think.
Yeah, and it's mind blowing when you I think most people, well, a lot of people have heard that Billie Eilish demo that they did, and the thing with the guys around the back of your head, and exciting.
And when it's done musically, it's really like, because it's like the sound effects record. Then when I was a kid, you could listen in headphones. It was like someone was giving you a haircut. Like, that's great, but making music work like that is difficult. But I think now, like Billie Eilish and artists are getting invested in it to the point where it will be amazing. Like some of the Elton John stuff that Greg Penny's doing is just insane. You live inside the song. And that's what you want as a listener, to be able to take something you already love and to actually have it envelop you is, that's end game for it. So I'm excited.
No, it's good to hear. Thank you. Can't wait to hear what you do with
it. Me neither.
Do you know when you're installing it, Andrew?
No, but stay tuned, because I'm here every week, so you'll know. Actually, you'll know, because it's all going to look really different.
Show up. And,
when I have to do a show from elsewhere in the house, and then I come back up here and there are speakers behind me, you'll definitely know. Actually, the modular is going to be behind me before the speakers, but yeah.
Nice. Exciting. Awesome. All right. Should we do some questions?
Sure.
Hey.
Okay, so our first one. So we're on a platform where people get to upvote each other's questions and all that. So our first question is our most upvoted question. This one is from Adrian, And Adrian asks, how much does the pressure of budget or deadline influence the creativity part for job?
Budget and deadline. Good question. I think the budget, not so much, because I think you can always cut your cloth according to your budget. You know, I mean, in this day and age, you can, especially with lockdown, you know, people are being very good at offering the services of musicians, very good at recording, to be able to send you stems. A string arranger might be able to arrange you some strings that you could play back in LA scoring strings or whatever VST you use. You know, there's ways of doing that, I think, and you know, with a sympathetic mix, you can make things sound good. But I think time is a difficult one. I mean, that depending on what you're working on. I mean, if you're working on a like a hit radio single, then you can work out how long it's going to take. But I think if you're working on an album, or you're working on something which is a little bit more lateral, a little bit more abstract, putting a time pressure on that would be very difficult. I think, like, I always think Dark Side of the Moon was finished when it was finished.
Yeah.
I don't think there was anybody putting the pressure on. But then I think about the story of Trevor Horn with Slave to the Rhythm and that Grace Jones album. Am I right in saying that he had just worked on Slave to the Rhythm, but worked on that so hard, and then he had to come with the album, but he made the album from all the outtakes that he'd made just on, because he had a,
as far as I know, yeah, that album is just one song.
Yeah. Which is so great. So in some ways that's very abstract. I mean, in some ways the deadline made Trevor be so abstract, because who would ever believe that you could make a whole record from one group of takes? I mean, having said that, Trevor Horn's sort of takes on that one track, I think there are probably like 50 versions of that track. But so I guess that doesn't really answer the question, but it gives you different.
Well, I think you can look at it where giving yourself limitations can sometimes really help the creativity. We've talked about it on a lot of these talks about, like, when Radiohead limited themselves to 24 tracks per song. Like, that's just the way we're going to make this record. So something like that. And time is another limitation. Like, okay, we're going to do this. But the thing with time, like with the 24 tracks, you can say, oh, okay, well, now we'll bounce those two things together. And really, you've got 25 tracks. So you can fake it. You can't fake time. So you have to be honest about whether you've actually managed to finish it or if you're just ditching it. And if it has to come out, it has to come out, and then it will come out. But if it's not done, it still isn't done, whether you hit a deadline or not, I think.
I think from my side, I think being a producer is about being objective. I think if you lose objectivity, which is on my record, I was very keen to keep the objectivity, because it's, you know, at times the record goes quite out there. But I think that as a producer, you have to have the objectivity, because the artist that you're working with would invariably have a different kind of sense of time than you would. And I think that being objective is great. And I think that sometimes boils down to working regular hours as well, as much as that sounds very square. But, you know, I talked about Damon Albarn. He's like 9 till 6. He's not working any past 6, you know. And I think that when he comes in and he's so enthusiastic, I'm obsessed by this. And I read about Roald Dahl, how he wouldn't spend long writing books, but he would just write a certain amount and then leave himself wanting more. And I get that feeling that's like Damon Albarn, you know. I'm the same, you know. I come in and I'm so ready to go the next day because I haven't been there till 3 a.m. I think that's where you can lose objectivity and strong weed. Which is not something I've ever done in the studio, but I've witnessed objectivity going right out the window at that point.
Right.
You know, I'm not judging it in a negative, but I'm just saying that they are usually the kind of things, the external things come into play, friends coming in the studio or whatever. But yeah, so
that's an interesting take on like kind of leaving the day with oh, but I kind of want to do this thing right now, but we're gonna stop, and then there's that thing to look forward to the next day. That's an interesting take on
and also think that, you know, if you're jamming, you're jamming, and sort of know that that's a never-ending thing. But I think that just taking a second to know, to go back to objectivity in terms of deadlines, what you want to achieve, and actually write it down. I mean, with Dave and Stormzy, who are two of the kind of wildest creatives I've ever had the fortune to work with, they really responded well to the big whiteboards of me writing down, okay, well, what are we doing today? We need to do this, we need to do this, you know, to feel like you've achieved. And we had a, you know, kind of strict deadline. But within that framework, you can be wildly creative.
Right. And knowing how to start, because otherwise you're just staring into the abyss every day. So
yeah.
Well, all of this leads into the next question, which is from DJ Wilkins, and he says, "Hi Fraser, how would you describe the role of a producer?" And we were kind of discussing this question in the chat room a little bit too, and we thought that we had expanded on to all the way, which we're kind of talking about now, about what your days actually look like, your role with the artist, you know, when you're actually in the creative position, if it's like co-writing and all that, and I guess just completely unpacking that, and even going a step further, there's a lot of questions about the actual profession of it, which you know, without having a time limit on a record, how do you balance like, okay, it's very much a business, and what am I doing this month compared to like, okay, next month I'm going to be on this record, which means we have a finite amount of time and all of that. So there's kind of a lot inside of that, but the basic question is, how do you describe the role of a producer?
I think everyone's different. You know, I think that's the joy of this, in that there's no, I mean, I guess you could look it up and there would be different definitions, but I mean, I can only really tell you for me, but I know obviously I've worked and I'm aware of loads of other producers and what they do. And I think that, you know, the visionary artist producer is one side, let's say Pharrell, where, you know, you're gonna go in there and Pharrell is gonna do Pharrell and it's gonna be interesting to you, but ultimately he's driving that and you, that may be something that you want. But from my side, I kind of more, I've always thought about the definition of what it is that I do. And I mean, I would say it's like songwriter, friend, if required, counselor, if required, bartender, if required, tea maker, chef, car parker, valet guy, technical helper, guitar player, piano player, drummer, beat maker. Yeah, it's right across the board. And I think that you could say, well, you know, what bits of songwriting or what bits are, but I mean, for me, I'm a writer producer. You know, there's things that I've produced that I haven't written, but I mean, primarily it's about getting in, working on. I think where I've enjoyed and where I've been most effective has been on albums where we've wanted to come up with a body of work that works as an album from start to finish. So I would say that all the roles are included. You know, and I know there was a sort of this hierarchy that I used to feel in some of the older studios when I just got started. You know, in that the producer could only do that, and he would have to get the tea from the intern or the tea boy or the, you know, stuff like that. I think in my career, it's never really been like that. You know, I'm sort of from the early sort of wave of producers that were songwriters that mixed, that kind of bought gear and worked out what a compressor was doing, but that were also kind of friendly with the artists. And that to me, I mean, I think a lot of the thing that I do is to help. I would say that's what I want to do is to help artists express themselves, and then be able to translate that into maybe the mic choice. So you flip from the level that is purely human into knowing how that emotion will translate via a U47 or a U67. I think that's maybe the skill of also being maybe at the back of the room talking to the artists and making sure that they're fine, whilst also making sure that the hi-hats are grooving with the bass, or the all those kind of things. So and also having the macro, the big picture, but also the micro, like that example of the hi-hats and the bass. I guess that's the when we used to have those cameras where you could actually, that weren't phones, those ones that had You're probably too young, Mark.
You're talking crazy now. I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Oh, what now? Yeah.
Zooming in.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah, and just being aware of like you just said, making sure the artist is okay in the back of the room while also listening to what's coming out of the speaker. And yeah, it's very, very good definition. On the sort of like, to go to the business side of that, what does it normally look like for you when you're called to do a record, and somebody, like you guys kind of touched on this earlier about, you have two people that want to work with you at the same time, and then finding the time to juggle those records while also balancing life and family and everything. Are there any particular insights that you have into, how you sort of run that business of, I'll work on this record for this amount of time versus, moving on to this one, or balancing multiples and all that?
I think you got to know where your personal energy is, and where, I'm a big believer in this kind of balance wheel of your health, of your family, of what you're doing for yourself in terms of stuff outside of the studio, whether it's reading a book or connecting mentally to your family and your relationships. I think it's really healthy to look at things like that, because I think if one thing gets really out of balance, you can be, I never wanted to be the guy with like 15 Grammy Awards and 3 broken marriages and just like a lot of pain in my heart from that kind of thing. And or the guy that had 15 Grammy Awards but was huffing and puffing when he got to the top of the stairs, or wasn't fit, or didn't have a relationship with my family. So I think that the balance is really important. I think when you're starting off, the budget thing is tough, budgeting. And for me, I used to just take on a lot of stuff because I have a big energy for that kind of stuff, and I have a very supportive wife that would understand, and I was learning all the time. So I was able to take on things like, writing songs, but also doing remixes on the side, and mixing other people's records, and doing additional production and on this and this kind of stuff. And you're learning, so you can kind of rationalize it. There's the artist in you that says, the artist voice says, but just go and write your record. But there's also the kind of other side that's like, yeah, but this is the 20th of the month, and you need to get paid by the end of the month, or your mortgage is going to bounce. So, but there's fun in that as well, because by doing all these different things, you learn how to juggle, and then when you finally do have the time, then it feels like the greatest gift ever. So I guess that would be my answer, if that helps. It does.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. That's great. Amazing. Okay, let's see. So our next question comes from their username is Omnigraph, and they say, do you have a list of references that you use at least at the start of a production or mix work? And if so, how do you choose them?
Yeah, I think I usually try. I have a few that I think always work. I mean, the few of Andrew's mixes are always lurking there. As an overview of great sounding records, there's if it's an electronic thing, then there may be a couple of like Strobe by Dead Mouse. I just like the low end on that track is just so incredible. And then there's things within the kind of pocket of what I'm going for. So yeah, that it's usually quite easy for me to work. The hardest thing was on my record because I wasn't too sure whether, or there wasn't really a blueprint, without trying to make my record sound like it's some radical new sounding thing, but I did want the horns to sound a little Steely Dan, and I did want the mids to sound a bit MGMT, but I wanted the drums to sound Travis Scott, and I didn't really know what was out there that, well, I guess Travis Scott when he worked with Tame Impala, but that was kind of more Travis Scott like. I guess when you're doing your own music, that becomes more difficult, but then I guess it's easier because if no one's done it, you're not really chasing the
right.
You're there, you're free to do something new. So it comes back to Andrew's, but it just has to sound, you just have to be happy with it, which I guess is the ultimate thing. That's where you kind of hopefully make something that people are going to still be listening to in 20 years time. But I think with the more immediate references, yeah, they're you can usually pick something out that you like. I think that's the most important thing, but that is still doing well in that particular genre.
Awesome. Great. Let's see. So we have one here from Jazzy Kwame. Hopefully I'm saying that last name right. And he says, "Hi Fraser, we met through Craig and Frank Tonto in CPH. Did you work on the Stormzy Grenfell Tower song? And how was that quick turnaround recording and writing process? Stay safe and cheers."
Nice to speak with you again, Kwame. I didn't, so I don't know what the process was. It was a really quick process. I don't know who did it. I think it was, I honestly don't know. I feel like it was a Simon Cowell thing. So yeah, I don't know about that quick process, but I did work on a record called which was a cover version of All the Things I've Done, which was with like all the rappers of the time, like Tinchy and N-Dubs and Chipmunk and loads of those guys. And that was like a chaotic day because people were literally scheduled to come in and they had to come and sing their bit and then leave. And yeah, that's kind of crazy. You're left at the end of the day. I mean, you just put it on loop and just say that here's the 8 bars. Just give me stuff. And you just know that it's a chaotic day, but you know it's going to be another 2 weeks of like serious editing. But it's fun at the same time as well. Good energy. But yeah, I'm not sure about that. The Grenfell record.
Fair enough.
Awesome.
Couple
Yeah.
more?
So maybe last one or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Cool.
It's up to Mr. T. Smith.
This is fun and good.
Awesome. Okay. So this is from Adrian again, and he says, as a songwriter, how do you feel about genres or just categories in general? Also, what inspires you the most?
Okay. Another good question. I think genres are there to be respected, and that it's almost like sometimes genres are the rules, and I think that you have to learn the rules to be able to break them. Like I think that if you wanted to really fuse jazz and rock, it would be really advisable to understand each genre well, and then you could break the rules and then throw in something else that you'd studied as well. So I think, yeah, genres are there to be respected, but also, and I think, just from a point of view of a long career, the more genres that are out there and then the new genres that grow, mean that you can keep growing as well. You keep learning, and that to me is the most important thing. You know, I think as soon as I stop learning in music, then I really probably would do something else, because there's other art forms that you could study. You know, but I think that, you know, we're so lucky to be in music that you got to be hungry to learn. And what was the second part? What keeps you motivated?
What inspires you the most? Yeah.
What inspires me the most? No, that's a tough one. I would say at the minute, nature, because I'm out on it a lot. We're all locked down, and there's something amazing about. I mean, I know it sounds quite out there, but I'm doing this thing at the minute where I'm doing an experiment where I do lots of things in the morning which are very short amounts of time. So I spend 15 minutes sight reading piano. I'll spend 15 minutes playing the guitar. And I'm doing this thing which could turn into a book, but it could be terrible. I'm hoping it's going to be amazing, but where I'm spending 10 minutes every day doing a self-portrait. And honestly, at the beginning, you'd be like, I'm not even sure that's a person. Like, what actually is that? I'm only on day 5 or 6 now. I'm hoping that by the end of 365 days, because this will be a great book. Imagine if it was like kind of some David Hockney type of thing. But I'm making the similarities between just looking at ostensibly my face and seeing like the symmetry of anyone, and how that relates to like the trees, and how symmetrical like a whole forest of trees can all be the same height, and just how that, just taking that interest in nature and like human nature in terms of who we all are, and then just bringing that back into, I mean, that's so inspiring. I mean, I don't really know how it relates to music, but I guess
everything relates to everything, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I want to just 2 quick things with that, because I find this stuff endlessly fascinating too, and I have a feeling you're gonna like these. So the idea of the individual versus the group, and the weird thing about humans is that we exist on both levels at once, but most animals don't. Like ants, individual ants, that means nothing. Ants within a colony, the colony is the organism, basically. Everyone thinks ants are like super helpful because within the colony they will build bridges for each other, but the truth is, if they would not be building bridges for ants from another colony, they would beat the shit out of them and rip their heads off. Like, so this idea of the individual versus the large organism made up from it, and that, to get to the point, is the same with trees. That the root networks of a forest, the forest is a single organism. And there's all this incredible study on the release of, not pheromones, but that type of chemicals into the air by some trees to call certain types of insects that are needed by other trees in the forest and things like that. So I think that anything that widens your perspective as a human being, and you start to zoom out a little bit, because it's very easy to be insular and think about, if not just yourself as a human, but just your very small family. And to zoom out in that way can also be incredibly creative as well. And I really don't have a point. I just love that thing about the trees, and I wanted to say it out loud. And it's my show, so.
I think we have to finish on that, because we can't top that.
Yeah, I think it was pretty incoherent, actually. We could top it pretty easily, but
well,
that was pretty good.
Well, let me ask you. Okay, so just to come back off it a little bit, we'll end with this, because I want to ask you something. You're talking about in the first half of your answer about discovering new music and always learning and respecting the genres and things like that. How? Because I find myself constantly discovering music from before and almost moving backwards in some ways. And I'm wondering, how much of that are you doing? Are you sort of opening up gigantic areas of recorded music from 60 years ago even that you had no idea existed, or things like that? Do you end up doing a lot of that?
I do, yeah. I do. Because there's so much. I'm really into like the the new stuff. I'm DJing a lot at the minute, and I'm just loving. I've always done that, but just being connected to that culture of new, fresh electronic music. That to me is very exciting. But I'm also becoming obsessed again with Todd Rundgren.
Right.
Just loving his catalog, you know. And I think that came about through watching this program called Divorce that was co-written by Sharon Hogan. That's a brilliant Irish writer, and in one of the episodes I just heard a song that I thought that sounds like Todd Rundgren, and then just expanded my knowledge of his songs, which is just amazing. So yeah, I think backwards and forwards,
right,
and then it all meets, doesn't it? In the middle somewhere.
And with Todd Rundgren, you can always then move out to his productions, because I think like the XTC record he made it's not my favorite, but it's up there. It's incredible, you know. So anyway, enough about.
And he had a band called Utopia.
Yes. Yeah, they didn't suck, you know.
That's Utopia.
Well,
awesome.
Have we done it? Is that it? I think we're done.
We're done.
Let's get on the questions. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Fraser. This is really, really great.
And amazing.
And this will force me to now just keep bothering you. And then as soon as we can do this not on video, I'm going to come see you.
No, absolutely. I'm here to be bothered. I mean, I'm loving talking to you again, Andrew. And, you know, you're never far from my thoughts or my ears, which is always good to know. And, yeah, can't wait to see it when the lockdown is over. We can hang out, and good luck with this amazing show that you put together.
Well,
you know, I'm honored to be part of the roster of amazing people that you've had on here, and hopefully there's some of it, small part of it is helping.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's, you know, there are lots of people doing it who are really, really great. I mean, obviously Dave Pensado, he's been doing it for years, and Warren Hewitt, and there are a lot of people doing it, and hopefully this is something slightly different or whatever and is useful. But I feel like it's also been really great to just connect with people, and I feel like from what I hear about what's in the chat, it's sort of a community that watches them as well. And I think all that stuff is really important. I really, really appreciate you doing this, because you've been very high up on the list for a long time. And it's, you know, it took a minute to get you on here too. So it's great. Really glad it worked out.
Great to be on, and keep up the good work, guys, because it's really inspiring what you guys are doing.
Excellent. All right. So
the chat is going by really fast with a bunch of thank yous to both of you guys.
So now Fraser has to sit on screen uncomfortably while, but I only talk for a second. So next week, Alan Meyerson. And if you guys don't know who Alan Meyerson is, look him up. And it should be pretty epic. I'm very excited about that. So now is where we all wave, and then at some random point in time, I cut the video off and mute our microphones. Right? I think that's the production value for this show. So thanks, everybody, and I'll see you next week.